Hi everyone, Catherine Michelle. Um, Today we are going to go over the 911 transcript from the David Crowley case. I'm going to read it to you verbatim as was given to us via an FOIA. I find a lot of the language in the 911 call interesting. We know that stress can cause people to overshare or say too much that really doesn't matter to a particular sequence of events. Or that overshare could be due to other things, like a particular narrative that a person wants to put across, to plant seeds and have someone kind of follow those seeds. I will read this to you, and you guys, decide for yourself how it sits with you. For me, while I read this, it kind of goes both ways. There are times where I see that, as we know, Judy Prochnow and Colin Prochnow made the 911 calls. It's no secret. And per Judy's own words, she stated that she signed a release to let this 911 transcript out. So it is what it is. And I'm not going to repeat her address on here. It is on the documents that are included in the police files, but just for the sake, I just don't feel right by putting her address out there. Anyway, as we go through this, leave comments. Tell me what you guys think. Do you hear anything odd, or are you understanding that Judy's probably under a whole lot of stress and shock from what she saw? Or is Judy also under a whole bunch of stress and shock from what she saw, but then leading a particular narrative? It goes both ways, like I said. It's either way could be true, but I will read you the documents and then you decide for yourself. This is from the Apple Valley Police Department on case file number 150000303, and this is the 911 transcript. We have the unknown male dispatcher. We have Judy Prochnow, Colin Prochnow, which is Judy's husband, and then Lorraine to be. So it starts off with the unknown male, or the dispatcher. I'll just call him dispatcher from here on out. Police and fire, how may I help you? Now, Judy, this is all Judy Prochnow. When it changes from Judy to somebody else, I will let you know. But until this point, this is Judy responding. Yes, this is Judy Prochnow. I live at, she gives her address. The dispatcher, yes. Judy, I think there's been a murder or suicide next door. Dispatcher, what's going on? Judy, well, we have, sorry, I gotta read this verbatim. Dispatcher, what's going on? Judy, well, we've noticed that they haven't, inaudible, they haven't been around. Dispatcher, So there were Christmas presents on the stoop, so I went over there, and there's a dog in the house, and there's definitely some bodies in the living room. Dispatcher, okay, stay on the line with me just a minute. Do you know what their address is? And then she says yes, and they're to the west of her. Dispatcher, okay, so how so? And then Judy, so like, and then she gives an address, 1050 or whatever. Dispatcher, okay, so if I'm facing and looking at your house, Judy, would it be, the house to the right or to the left? If you're facing my house, it would be to your right. To the right. What are you seeing in there? It looks like there's a pile of bodies and one like the head is eaten off. Oh no. I suppose by the dog, and my husband thought they were dummies, but the hands look real. The dispatcher, inaudible. Judy, and they would have been there since before Christmas. Okay, so you haven't seen? And Judy, and all their Christmas lights are still on in the house, and my husband said he saw a gun. Dispatcher, on the floor? Judy, yeah. Dispatcher, okay, stay on the line with me just a minute, please. Judy, it would be a husband, wife, and child. Dispatcher, stay on the line with me, Judy. I'll get some people rolling over there. You saw Christmas presents. And then Judy, Colin, I'm calling 911. Dispatcher, you saw presents inside the home too? Judy, there's presents on the front step and they've been there since before Christmas. And there's definite, I peeked in the front window and it's gross. Colin, what's their address? And then Colin states 1051. Judy then states 1051 Ramsdale Drive. The dispatcher, okay, 1. Judy, don't look in the window, Lorraine. Dispatcher, 1051 Ramsdale, that's okay. Judy, right. Dispatcher, and you say, Judy, Lorraine, don't look in there. Lorraine, no? Judy, no. Dispatcher, so it looks like, Judy, don't look in there. Dispatcher, so it looks like multiple bodies inside? Judy, yes. Dispatcher, and it looks like the dog may have been? Judy, yes. Dispatcher, okay, you saw the gun on the floor there? Judy, yes, my husband saw it. He's not here right now. He's talking to the other neighbor. We hadn't seen any movement over there. We just thought they were gone for Christmas, and we came back from Florida this week, and they still hadn't, inaudible, and the presents were still there, so my husband went over there to check. Dispatcher, okay, they thought they were gone for Christmas, haven't seen any movement. Judy, so there hasn't been anything, movement there since before Christmas. They haven't shoveled. Excuse me, I think I'm going to throw up. Dispatcher, okay, ma'am. I won't keep you any longer. Okay, Judy? Judy, okay, thank you. Dispatcher, I appreciate the call. I got help coming. Judy, okay, bye. Dispatcher, thank you. Now we're going to go over the transcript of the call between Colin Prochnow and the 911 operator. Again, it will be dispatcher and then Colin. The dispatcher, inaudible, it's 911 police fire. How can I help you? Colin, yeah, my name is Colin Prochnow. I live in Apple Valley. And my next door neighbors, they haven't been home since Christmas or before Christmas? ? Dispatcher, okay. Colin, and there's Christmas presents on the front step and there's a dog in the house and nobody answers. Dispatcher, okay, what's the address again? Your phone kind of broke out. And then he says, my address is. And the dispatcher says, okay, do you know what their house number is? Yes, it's 1051. Would like somebody to come over here and, what is it? Do a welfare or a well check or something like that? I added an extra something. Sorry, I kind of stuttered there, but it just says or do a well check or something like that. Dispatcher, okay, and you said 1051 for them? Colin, 1051. Okay. Colin, and I looked through the front window and there's like 3 dummies on the floor. I don't think there are any bodies, but it looks like there's a gun next to one. A handgun? Dispatcher, okay, and what was your name again, sir? My first name is Colin, Collin. Last name is Prochnow, P as in Paul, Rochnow. And your phone number? Gives it, and then okay, and then he gives a cell number and his home phone number. And the dispatcher says, all right, in just 1 second. Colin goes on to say, and we were out of town the first week in January, and when we left, the presents were on the step, and I told my wife, I didn't notice them the other day because I didn't look, but I said I'm going to run over there and see if those presents are still there, and they are. And he doesn't answer his cell phone because the neighbor next to him on the other side has his cell number. Dispatcher, okay. Did you already call? Colin, what? Yeah, we tried calling that cell number and nobody answered. Dispatcher, no, I mean, did you call us? Did you already call us? Your wife already called us. Judy just called us. Colin, oh, okay, all right, thank you. Dispatcher, thank you, bye-bye. Colin, yep, bye. Is it just me, or are you guys kind of seeing a pattern here? There's a lot of overshare there that's not necessary. Christmas presents on the stoop. So I went over there. Why would you go over to somebody's house because you see presents on their front door? Doesn't make sense to me. Maybe they were just gone for the day. I mean, I don't know. It just seems kind of strange to me. And right away, the first person who states murder or suicide is Judy. I think there's been a murder or suicide right away. Police and fire, how may I help you? Yes, this is Judy. I live at, and I think there's been a murder or suicide next door. And we've noticed that they haven't, and it's inaudible, they haven't been around. So there were Christmas presents on the stoop. So I went over there, and there's a dog in the house, and there's definitely some bodies in the living room. Now, okay, I can imagine that must have been a shock. Whether somebody knew about it or not, and I am not saying Judy knew about it. I'm just stating that whether or not somebody knew, that would have been a horrific thing to see. And so that I believe she's being very honest, and it's like a visceral reaction, like, oh my goodness, there are bodies in this living room. And then she goes on to say, and she says she's the first one to state that the head was eaten off, and one like the head is eaten off. It just looks like there's a pile of bodies, and one like the head is eaten off. How can you see that through a living room window? Jumping the gun, throwing out a narrative, throwing out, just whatever came to the top of her head. And it's like, why would you go there? Looking at the one photo we have, that would have not been the first conclusion that I think most people would come to. And they haven't been there since, notice this, since before Christmas. This narrative of since before Christmas is touted by several people. Yet the police's narrative and their conclusion states that the murders occurred in the house on Christmas. Everybody's saying they haven't seen them since before Christmas. So are they there? Or are they not there? I just want to know. And their Christmas lights are still on in the house. And her husband says he saw a gun. And now the police reports do state that a gun was on the floor. So Colin probably really did see the gun on the floor. And then she's like, and the presents are on the front step, and they've been there since before Christmas. Now, going through the other people that were interviewed in the police records, which you can find, and it's on the Justice for David Crowley family page. It's on the Gray Stage, web press or something. I'll put that link down below as well. It's on Dan Hennon's The Ugly Truth page where he lists all of these documents. These are all there. It's readily available. You guys can all read them. And when you read through those, most people say they didn't even notice any presence on the doorstep until January 1st or January 10th. I think maybe it was January 10th. It was somewhere between the 1st and 10th of January. And now they're saying that they've noticed the presence, that they've been on the stairs, the front step of the house, since before Christmas. And then Judy goes to tell Lorraine, don't look in there, don't. And I mean, she didn't have a right to say that, but I understood why she said that. She doesn't have a right to go around telling anybody what they should or shouldn't do. But at the same time, you understand it's like you don't want anybody else to be shocked by that visual right there. So that's neither here nor there for me. I think nothing of it. I don't think it was her place, but I understood it. To me, that seems reasonable. And then it goes on to say, again, now she's reiterating for what? How many times is this said now when we get here? We've noticed they haven't been around. So then the presents were there before Christmas. Let's see. I'm going through this and reading it. And now, okay. Uh, and there's presence on the front step. And I just peeked in the window, and it's gross. And then that's when she's asking Colin for the address, and then that's when Lorraine goes to look, and Judy says don't. And then it says, for the fourth time in a row, my husband saw it, and he's not here right now. He's talking to the other neighbor that was speaking of the gun. So it was Colin who saw the gun. Judy doesn't. She never states that she saw the gun on the floor in the 911 call. She doesn't state that at all. Whether or not she did, I don't know. This is the 911 call. And then again, we hadn't seen movement over there. We just thought they were gone for Christmas, and we came back from Florida this week. So they came back the week of January 17th, because that's when the bodies were found. So sometime that week they came back. So again, that's number 4. And there hasn't been anything. Movement since before Christmas. 5th time now. They haven't shoveled. Excuse me, I think I'm going to throw up. Now, I looked at all of the weather for that area for that entire month leading up to when the bodies were found, and there was minimal amount of snow that fell, maybe an inch or two. It was very minimal, and that was weeks before these bodies were even found. So the sidewalk does show some snow on it, but for the most part, it's like, okay. So they didn't shovel their sidewalk. Again, it's just, to me, it's weird. But 5 times she states the narrative of they weren't seen since before Christmas. Now, Colin, he gets on, and first thing out of his mouth is they haven't been home since before Christmas. You're calling 911 to report bodies on the floor, so you give your name, your address, and the first thing out of your mouth is your neighbors haven't been home since before Christmas? And then the dispatcher's like, okay. That's me throwing in that okay, because I don't know how it was said. And then there are presents on the front step, and there's a dog, and there's nobody answers. So again, we're going back to the presents on the front step. And so then he's just asking for a well check. And then he states that he looked through the window, and he didn't believe they were real bodies. He said that it looked like dummies to him on the floor. So could that be shock talking? Absolutely, could be. So I'm not going to give that one way or another. You guys may have a different opinion and a different thought. Would be great to hear it. Then he gives his name. And again, back to the second time he's talking, they're trying to get information from him, but he keeps going back to the narrative. We were out of town the first week in January. And when we left, the presents were on the front. And we didn't notice them the other day. Okay, you notice them before Christmas. You notice them before you go on vacation. You notice them that day, but you don't notice them the day before or the other day? And since you didn't notice them the other day, why would you think to yourself? Now, here's what I find is odd. Listen to this statement. And it says, okay, the dispatcher's like, all right, just 1 second. And then Colin, goes on to say, and we were out of town the first week in January. And when we left, the presents were on the front step. And I told my wife, I didn't notice them the other day because I didn't look. Really? But I said I'm going to run over there and see if those presents are still there. And they are. And he doesn't answer his cell because the neighbor next to him on the other side has his cell phone number. Now, we looked at all of the cell phone records. There is no call made to any of their phones that day. None. So, who are they calling? Who is that neighbor calling? I don't know. Did Colin actually see that neighbor make that phone call? Or did the neighbor say they made that phone call? I don't know. And I'm not going to call him a liar here. I'm just saying the cell phone records show no calls made to David's or Komel's cell phone. So the whole entire narrative, all coming from Colin, is they were gone before Christmas, the presents were there. They were gone before Christmas, the presents were there. You know, I don't know. To me, it's just very, very odd. And when I read it all together, and to get a better feel for what was said, I was typing this out, and it helped kind of bring to home some of these points. You know, why? Why is that the only thing they're saying? They're not like, you know, oh my God, my neighbors are dead. Please send help. I'm so afraid. This is scary. They have a child in the house. None of that. It's all about where I was. I saw presents. They weren't home since before Christmas. Where I was, we saw presents. They weren't there before Christmas. Judy says it 5 times. Colin says it, I believe, twice. It's a total of 7 times without any other mention of what really happened or what they were seeing. I mean, is that odd to you? I find it very strange. Very, very strange. Again, could that be stress talking? Or could that be a preconceived narrative? You know, Judy gets highly upset, and maybe rightfully so, when she's questioned about this. But I have offered twice. I offered to talk to her here, and then I went to her site on her day, and then she sends me a private message when she didn't show and she saw my video where I called her out on it because we went live. We're like, hey, where are you? We're here. And then she's like, well, you didn't provide me a phone number. I'm like, why would I provide you a number to your call-in debate? So she's never there to explain this and to help. And again, she doesn't have to. Let's be honest, she doesn't have to. But it would be nice to understand why the only thing they could think about was their narrative, where they saw presents that nobody else saw, and that the family hadn't been seen since before Christmas. There was one other neighbor who stated they hadn't seen them since before Christmas. And yet these murders took place, according to the police, in the house on or the day after Christmas. So if all these neighbors are noticing movement in what the Crowley family does, I would think they would notice they were there on Christmas. But nobody saw them before. And again, this kind of all ties in with a lot of what we are piecing together with the phone records. And we know phones can track you and what you do, but calls made, texts received, and things just kind of all abruptly stop before Christmas. But we know the bodies were not there since before Christmas. So what happened between the time that everyone stopped seeing them? Where was that family? And the time that their bodies were found? There's a huge time gap. It's actually like, over a month, well over a month. So, it's sad. So tell me what you think about that 911 transcript. Hi YouTube, it's Catherine Michelle. Today I had a meeting with Dr. Leon Kelly from the El Paso County Coroner's Office. He's a medical examiner, and he helped me to understand the autopsy reports. We didn't discuss everything in them, but we discussed a few topics that we will be going over in a minute. However, he did ask me, though. He was kind of uncertain as to why. He asked me, he's like, well, why are you researching this? He goes, what got you interested? And I said, well, I had been watching a YouTube video, caught my attention about 4 months ago, and I said I just started really digging into it. And he's like, so that's it? He goes, let me get this straight. He goes, you saw a YouTube video, and then you just took it from there? And he says, do you know anybody in the case? And I said, no. I said, I don't have a monkey in the circus. I don't care if he's guilty or if he's not guilty. I said, just after reading the reports and putting everything together, I can't see that he's guilty. And I said, that's right. I just saw a YouTube video and it caught my attention, so I decided to start researching it. And so far, these are my notes so far, just so you can see what I've been doing. And this is not even all of the reports yet. That's only about half of the available reports, and so I'll be adding to this binder. And and he asked then what my experience has been. So I figured, most of you know that I was an EMT. I went to nursing school. But what a lot of you don't know is that research has been a passion of mine for a very, very long time. One of the biggest cases, I guess you could say, I did research on was on the Robert Logan and Mike Logan case. A book was written about their convictions as murderers, and that book was called Evil Intentions by Ronald J. Watkins. Now, how did I get to come to know them? My mother married Robert Logan, and at the time I had just had a book published, and it was an intrigue. They call it romance intrigue, but for me it was mainly intrigue novel. But you can't, if publishers want to publish it, you have no say where they're going to put it. So anyway, when they found out that I had written a book and had it published, then they wanted me to look into their case. So I bought the book, Evil Intentions, and I started reading it. And again, a whole lot in that book was just like, okay, how they investigated it didn't make sense, didn't make sense. And again, I didn't care. I had no allegiance to either one of these guys, zero. I mean, they were in prison for murder. So, and even if they weren't, if they were still on trial, just because my mother was married to one of them, does not mean, again, it would be, I'm going to take my mom's side. That's not how I operate. And in fact, I've even turned my own brother in when he stole merchandise or equipment from a college. I have no allegiance to anybody once they do something wrong. Right, wrong, or indifferent. If you're wrong, I'm not going to be your buddy to hide your crime. So, and with the Logan brothers' crimes, they both were convicted. Robert Logan has since been released from prison. Mike Logan, who I believe it was Mike Logan and Jesse Gillies who were the main characters in the book Evil Intentions. Mike will never get out. He has a life sentence. Jesse Gillies was executed. And I spent 4 years researching that, making multiple trips down to Arizona. They were to the different prisons. They weren't always in the same prison, so I would have to make trips and get special permission, because down there, if you have one family relative on an inmate's visitation list, you can't have another one. So I had to write in advance and get special permission, and I had to tell them what I was doing. And then again, you had to get permission to have pencil and paper, because those things are not allowed. So I spent 4 years researching these crimes. Now, a lot of the inconsistencies I found and the lack of investigation on the part of the Arizona Police Department, it was appalling. They did a really poor job. However, what they did get right, these guys were guilty. Guilty as the day is long. And they both admitted it. But they were looking for an easy way out, and they were hoping that I could get Jesse Gillies off or get his sentence reduced, because he was sentenced to death. So the day came when the state attorney's office contacted me and asked me for my research, especially where it was referring to Jesse. And that was really difficult for me. Not because I didn't want to share it, but because I told them, I said, what I have is not going to help your client. And I don't want to feel like I'm going to be responsible. Even though I knew I wasn't responsible for his death sentence, I didn't want to be like, he had one last ditch effort and they were looking for my material. And I kept saying, please don't, this is not what you want to see. But they insisted, so I sent it to him. And about a month later, he was executed. So it took a long time to deal with that. And the hard part was knowing he was guilty and what a horrible person he really was. Not nice. But, long story short, my research days go way back. And so when I find something, I just don't go willy-nilly. Oftentimes it'll seem like I'm going in circles, because that's what I'll do. I'll find something, go, wait a second, something here isn't sitting right. I'll research that, come up with a different idea, and I keep going until finally everything is condensed into the best answer that can be proven. What you think you know doesn't matter. It's what you can prove. So anyway, I thought that was really interesting. He asked, so there's a little bit more of my background. And the last job I had, I did a lot of research at my job, and it was a government contracting facility. And so I did a lot of research for them as well. So I have a real different way of researching, and it may not agree with what everybody says. And when I come out with something, that's why I say at this point, this is what I think, this is what is making sense to me. And then it'll come back later when I get other people's information. Like today, there's going to be some changes because of what Dr. Kelly, how he explained to me the reports. And I have no problem with that. I don't understand everything, and it's good to get somebody's opinion who deals with all this stuff. So, what I spoke with Dr. Kelly today about, I asked him his background, and he has been a medical examiner from 2007 until present. He got his degree at Indiana University, and he's done right around 4,000 autopsies in his life. He specializes in strangulation and sudden infant death. He does not have a forensic background, although he understands some of it. It's not his core background. So he was able to help me understand some things, but he couldn't explain everything. What I appreciated about him is he said, well, this is how I understand it, but there's not enough information, and my opinion doesn't count, which is true. Our opinions don't count. And so I asked him if he had, and then the first thing I gave him were the autopsy reports of David, Komel, and Raniya. And that's all he read at first. He read those, and then I showed him a photo. And so I asked him, I said, do you have experience with small to medium-sized dogs scavenging on human remains? Sorry about that. And he said, yes, a lot of experience in that area. And I said, would you conclude a dog ate the hands of a victim if the arms are located under the body with no signs of the body being moved by the dog to gain access to the hands? And I was reading this from the police report. And he said he would not make that determination. He said because there's not enough information to interpret. He says, the way I was reading it, the hands are like this. He says the hands could have been like this. They could have been like this. He said there is not enough information to make that determination. I said, okay, or to interpret in that way. I said, okay, makes sense. And I said, and if dogs are chewing, I go, are there usually teeth marks on the bones and skin? And he said, at the end of the skin, no. But on the bones, he said, not necessarily. It would depend on how the dog scavenged, how fresh the bones were, and how long the body had been decomposing. So again, it was another one of those, it's a supposition, not necessarily something he could answer yes or no in this case. Then we talked about, I showed him the photo, and I said, if you walked in fresh to the scene, what would your first initial gut reaction be? And he said, my first thought would be, where's the dog? So he said that he truly feels like the dog did scavenge and did eat some of these body parts. He doesn't know if it was all of it. Again, there's just not enough information, and I haven't seen all of the photos. He said he would have to see the photos on exactly how those bodies were laying. But right now with what we have, he said there's just not enough information. And then I asked him, and I also asked him, I said, well, I'm still trying to find that report. I know I read it several times where they state the dog was thin and dehydrated. So I asked him, I said, could a dog be dehydrated if it had been sustaining itself on human flesh? And he said, yes, it could be dehydrated. So that was helpful to me. And then I said, how far advanced is decomp if the internal organs can be weighed and measured? He says, as long as there's some kind of fluid, if they're still there, they will be taken out. If they have to be scooped or whatever, then they're measured. And it also depends on what the moisture content is of not only the room, but of the body, and how far is decomp. And then I asked him, I said, I was told lividity can't be discerned once a body is refrigerated. And I said, is that true? Because I did get that from a deputy coroner from another state. I asked them about this. And they emphatically stated that once refrigeration happens, it changes the body and how the decomposition is reacting. He said in his experience, though, it's the opposite. He said, that the line of lividity will always be present. He said, as the body decomposes, blood and liquid is what leaks through, and lividity is blurred. So you might not be able to see it as well, but he says it's there. I guess, now this is me putting words into his mouth. This is what I understood him to mean. So as they start to do an autopsy, as they're cutting through, you might not be able to see it due to the decomposition, the marbling and the slippage. But I'm going to assume that once they start to cut, then you might be able to see the line of lividity somewhere on that. But he says it depends. But he said usually it's there, but it's going to be blurred, so you have to know what to look for. And then I said, can you determine approximate time of death with the last date known to be alive, the decomposition, and the room temperature? Because they were stating that the Crowleys died approximately 3 weeks before they were found, and so on and so forth. And he said no. He said no one can. A very rough estimate, but no one should determine. However, looking at the decomposition from the photos, he says his rough guess would be that they were not dead for 3 weeks, that they were only dead from a few days to a week. That is what the decomp process looked to him, only to that stage. He was very, very clear that he does not feel that those bodies were laying there for any longer than a week, which is interesting. I found that really interesting because everything states that the bodies had been there for 3 weeks. And I even told him that the glass door was cracked 1/4 of an inch, that the heat was set at 68, and all of that. And he goes, well, that can matter. However, the rate of where they were, the body with the marbling, and you could still see, and even though there was some mummification of the hands and feet of the feet that were bare, he said, no, in his professional opinion, it was no more than a week. And then then I brought up the subject of the gunshot wounds, about being indeterminate. And I said, is the distance considered indeterminate in a gunshot wound to the head when stippling and gunshot residue is missing? Yet there's a circular impression around the gunshot wound. He stated he doesn't know what the report means by impression. He said it could, my notes, my handwriting is very sloppy, just so you can see it. I'm having a hard time reading it. He says he does not know what the report means by impression, could be due to the weapon, or could be due to swelling of the tissues due to decomposition. So he said, again, they should not have used the word impression because there's no, he said sometimes as the tissues swell around a gunshot wound, that tissues can look like an impression, but that doesn't mean there's an impression there. It's just often due to decomposition. So he said he wouldn't say that. By what he read, he felt that was not worded correctly. And then I said, would a circular impression around a gunshot wound be indicative of a silencer? He said, not necessarily. Again, not enough information. He said, could be, but that doesn't mean it was. And then I said, what does the description of decomposition tell you about the deaths? Who died first? Was there significant time between the deaths? And he said there's no way to tell. He just said that they, let me think. I don't want to put words into his mouth. We might not have discussed that any further, so I'm going to leave it at that. He just stated that there was really no way to tell, but that they were all dead and dead for about a week. And so I asked him how mummification is influenced, and he says it's influenced by the environment as well as what the body part is resting on. Like if, and he showed me a photo of a body that had mummification of one hand, but the other hand looked, well, almost normal. If I saw that hand, I would go, okay, that's a dead hand. But anyway, there was a distinction between how the two looked. One didn't have mummification, one did. And he says that was due in part because of where these hands were resting. If it's like laying on a carpet where there's more heat going to be absorbed, the mummification process will happen faster. Whereas if something is either like someone's wearing socks or shoes, or if they're laying on a tile or a bare floor, then it's going to take longer to mummify. So that's why, probably why, there's really no definitives, but probably why David's feet in his hand and then little Raniya's hand that was resting on the floor were mummified, and then why Komel's feet were not. What else did we talk about? We talked about a lot of stuff. I have notes everywhere. Let me go here. And at first he was, when he's reading the reports and we're just going over the cursory part, and he started laughing. He goes, "Why are you even looking at this?" He goes, "It seems to me that the guy did it." And I said, "I agree. At the cursory level, that's what it looks like." I said, "However, when you start looking at things that don't make sense," I said, "you have neighbors stating that they heard 3 gunshot wounds. There were 6 casings found. And when you look at the gun, only 3 shots fired." And then I said, because he asked too about the gun, he says, "Were his prints on the gun?" And I said, "Yes, his and his daughter's prints were found on the gun." I said, "However, on the gun safe, only the wife's prints were found." And he's like, "Well, that doesn't make sense." And I go, "No, it doesn't." And then I showed him the notes, the submit to Allah now. And I know some people keep saying Alan, and I don't see an N there. I see an H. But I can't get a clear enough picture of that. You may be correct. It may say Alan, but it doesn't look like Alan, especially with what was written on the wall. And he'd asked about that too. He goes, "Well, what's that writing on the wall?" And I showed it to him. And then I showed him David's handwriting. I showed him Dan's handwriting, and then I showed him what was written on the notepad and then what was written on the wall. And he's like, "Well, that's kind of curious." I said, "Exactly. It's not David's handwriting." And then what else did we talk about? Oh, the footprints, the supposed footprints. And I said, "Could you please take a look at this?" So he's looking at them, and I said, "Can you tell me why in these photos it's only the right foot and that's the only foot that if it is a footprint? Some of them actually look like a handprint, but I don't know." And again, he's like going, "Well, that doesn't make any sense either." And I said, "I know." I said, "Now do you see why? Do you see why I'm continuing to investigate this?" And he's like, "Well, yeah." And so by the time I spent about an hour with him, wasn't enough time. We didn't get enough time to go over everything, and he did the best he could answering the questions I had. But by the time I left, excuse me, throat's dry, he had more questions than answers, just like we all do. So he went from at the very beginning, when he first just read the report and saw the picture, to, "Well, why are you investigating this? Because this could be what it is," to after I started showing him the police reports and then the BCA DNA reports, to he was like, "Huh, okay, this doesn't seem right." I said, "Well, now you know why I'm investigating it, because it just doesn't seem right." And that's kind of where we left it. I will be getting back in touch with him with more questions that I have, because I just didn't get a chance. I wanted to ask him actually a couple more questions that were very pertinent, but just ran out of time. And I'm really grateful to Dr. Kelly for doing this, because he actually put off a conference call he had with someone else to sit there with me for another 15 minutes to help, kind of wrap up where we were. Let me explain. He did over the autopsy reports with the gunshot wounds. This was really, really important. Where is that? Okay, and then if I'm repeating myself, I'm really, really sorry. But he explained why it would be considered indeterminate. He stated that there are, I have to find that because it was made so much sense when he was telling me about that. Maybe I wrote it on the back of one of these pages. Yeah, I do that too, because I think it's really important that we understand how he explains the three. Oh, here we go. There are three types of terminology they use. Oh, it's so dry here. When they're writing up the reports. One being direct contact, where something is actually touching a certain part of the body. And then intermediate, where it's 2 to 3 feet away. And then distant, where there's no evidence other than the bullet. And intermediate, where it's 2 to 3 feet away, he says there will usually be gunpowder and stippling. And of course, with the gun press to the head, he said there will be stippling, gunpowder, and everything within that wound. And distant being the only thing they know. They can't say how far, because the only thing they found was a bullet or a bullet fragment. He did state that on Raniya's, of course, somebody had a question, and actually a few people have had a question about how to determine the entrance wound versus the exit wound. And he stated that, okay, I'm almost sure you said this. If you didn't, Dr. Kelly, please tell me because maybe I read this somewhere else. But with the entrance wound, there will be internal beveling of in this case, the skull, and the exit wound will be external beveling. So that's how they can tell the difference between the entrance wound and the exit wound. He said that, whose autopsy were we talking about? Oh, when they were describing, I think it was on Komel's gunshot wound, when they were talking about how it entered and where it was located, where they were talking about, an inch from the head and a half inch from the shoulder. He said that report was written by an amateur, probably somebody in training, because what they stated made no sense at all. And it was not written correctly. And he said, in the sense of calling them indeterminate, he says since there wasn't any gunshot residue or anything, at least I don't think there was on the bodies, other than maybe, then that would be the correct term, would be intermediate. And he said that their decomp rate for all three bodies is the same thing that they say in here, is early to moderate. Again, he stated only about a week dead. And he did feel, he was very emphatic, and stating that he felt the dog did indeed do some scavenging, but without seeing photos and actually being able to read the medical examiner's report, which is different than the autopsy report. He couldn't say for sure which part of the body was scavenged or whatever. But I did ask him, I said, well, what about the fractured rib? Because he said, well, this was before he actually saw the picture of the bodies. And he said, just by reading the reports, he said, well, yeah, a dog could take the arm. I said, okay, now let's look at the photo. And I said, well, what about her fractured rib? And he's like, not likely. So again, there's a fracture to a rib that doesn't explain anything. Does not explain. There's nothing there to explain how her rib got fractured. And I think that was pretty much all we talked about. He was also couldn't understand why they didn't do handwriting analysis, so that should have been done. And also he was curious on how the blood was actually located on the bullets and on some of the areas. He did say that just because there wasn't blood on the floor around where they were, he goes, that doesn't mean that's where they were shot. Okay, we've all said that too. However, with how they're laid, and at first he says it was, again, he said it was possible that David could have done this, until I pointed out that I said, well, but the position of David's body will tell you a different story. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, in the police reports, as they're describing it, and I went and I read him that part where, at least I think I read him that part. I read him some parts, but it's in here, where it describes that David is laying there, and then Komel and her sweater is laying on top of David's leg. And then that's when he goes, well, that shouldn't be. And I said, yeah, I know. And where the blood is located on the floor, and I'm not sure, I didn't do enough research yet on that to find out whose blood that was. But he said they were probably in a standing position and also at a low point where there's a low trajectory, because there's like splatter going this way and then drops. So it's kind of a mixture. So they could have been standing and fell or something like that. But again, that doesn't make sense. He said dogs do lick up all the blood. I think that's my point I was getting to. And he showed me another photo of a body that had been eaten by this particular person's Labrador puppy. They called it a puppy, but I know Labrador dogs can be big, and I know how hard they bite. I've had one myself. So, but like I told him, I said, but that skull is still intact. The spine is still intact. All the soft tissues are gone, and I think most of the ribs were gone, but the skull is still completely intact. He said that could have been due to the fact that they believed that particular person died of a natural cause, but maybe the difference was because the Crowleys were shot in the head. Again, everything's speculation at this point because we don't have all of the information. So again, all in all, when he started off with a certain opinion after just reading the reports and then looking at the photo, but then as we're going through it more and more, and I start bringing out more of the questionable details that were bypassed, he wasn't quite as adamant anymore. He just got to the point where he's like, okay, yeah, there's not enough information for me to tell you one way or another. So I felt that was pretty hopeful, because it was no longer, asking, well, yeah, the gun is right there, and it was that gun that shot the bullets, and they're the only ones in the house. And I'm like, okay, but you have a back door that's been opened. You have a fight going on between the brothers, and you have another sister trying to stir up trouble and, yelling at them in another email. And then Komel jumps in and says, hey, wait a second, we've had contact, and, you need to take it down a notch or two. But my interpretation, not hers, not necessarily what Komel said. And I said there was, and they also mentioned to him that I think it's Detective Klonikos, who was the electronics device investigator, how he went through every device that they were, they could pull from the Crowley house, and he could find zero, no motive whatsoever. And he went all the way back, I think, to early to mid 2000s. And so he's telling Detective Bone, he goes, I can't give you a reason. There's no motive here whatsoever. And there was some other, and again, he's not a detective. He just found that quite interesting. And I said, yeah. And I said, there's another guy who, Sean, I believe, is the one who owed the state of Minnesota like $38,000 in taxes, and how he's yelling at David saying, hey, you know what, why are you going to do this? Because you're going to send me to prison. And so the more information that Dr. Kelly was getting, like I said, it went from my take on how he was reacting. It went from, well, yeah, I'd say he did it, to not so sure. Not saying he did it, but I'm no longer saying he really did. So to me, it was great. It was good progress, and he answered a lot of my questions, and I think a lot of your questions as well. And the main thing being that until we can get better photos, he said he would like to see the actual photo of how the bodies actually were laying, the photo of how Komel is laying, and how her sweater's on top of David's leg, and just things like that, because that's extremely important. He couldn't have been standing to shoot himself in the head and then have his leg end up underneath her sweater. So it's these little details you have to pull out and go, okay, we got to look into this. So all in all, I thought it was really good, and Dr. Kelly did say he would answer any more of my questions that I had, and I know I'll have more because it was so rushed and so much information, and he did his best to go into it in depth as much as he could, and he showed me different photos of dog scavenging, and what I saw in those photos, they didn't resemble what I saw in the Crowley home. However, he saw similarities. I mean, he's the medical examiner, but I didn't see that type of injury. And in the photos that he showed me, every part that was exposed, that was bare skin, but when the dog was involved, it was gone almost, with the exception of the lower half of the extremities. Waist on up, gone, down to the spine and the skull, gone. But the spine and the skull were there. So, which is totally different, because David had an exposed abdomen. Raniya had a completely exposed abdomen. Her face was not touched. Her head was not touched. Yet David's and Komel's heads are gone. So if any of you out there has better photos, or the one that especially shows how Komel was lying on top of her hands, and how the bodies were actually from a different angle, not the angle we have, please send them to me, and my email address will be down below. Thank you, and hopefully that will explain a little bit more, and I hope you got as much out of that with Dr. Kelly as I did. And again, I really felt that he was being very, very, very helpful. However, we have to keep in mind his specialty is not forensics, but he has experience in this particular area, but it's not his expertise. So, and he was, clear to state that, and he was very clear to state that his opinion, and nobody's opinion, will matter. What you think versus where your expertise lies are two separate things. So, okay, thank you, Dr. Kelly, and I will be getting back in touch with you again. And I just, again, hope this helped you a little bit. And I think we're getting closer and closer to a resolution. And I'm now looking for handwriting experts. I'm going to be sending stuff off. Pay for it out of my own pocket if I have to, because I really think we have to do this with science. We have to prove one way or another. If he did it, it will be proven. If he didn't do it, it will be proven. I have my own take on it. And the more I look into this, and the more I investigate and research, the more I'm going down that path. But we'll leave that for another day. So we'll talk to you later.
Hello, my name is Dan Hennon. Today is April 25th, 2019, and I'll be providing a broadcast on the Crowley case updates. Tonight's episode is called The Curious Case of Dan Crowley Sr. The Crowleys were found January in 2015. David Crowley, his wife Komel, and their daughter Rani. And so after that point, the police concluded their investigation a year later and concluded that David Crowley killed his daughter, his wife, and then ultimately killed himself. And that is where we are today. The case is closed. Apple Valley Police detectives are not interested in reopening it, regardless of what is provided to them. So about a year ago, the phone records were released from AT&T from the mobile phones of the family members, and tonight's episode is going to be going over a little bit of the phone records of what was documented as evidence of the phone records relating to David Crowley himself, and some commentary that was provided to law enforcement from David's father, Dan Crowley Sr. So let's get into it. On page 64 of the 94-page police report from the Apple Valley Police Department, we see the following timeline put together by the Crowley family, submitted by Dan Crowley Sr. Presented this timeline to Apple Valley detectives to put together the various texts and responses back and forth from the communications, from the alleged communication between David and his father, Dan Sr. So here's what we get. I'll read them through. Early November, DJ, that's Dan Jr., that's David's older brother, Dan Jr. DJ texted David saying he loves him and would like to make things right. No response. November 7th, I text David to see if he's still alive after finding he gave DJ his new phone number. And remember, in October, David Crowley and Komel each get new phone numbers with a new account and a cell phone subscription with AT&T. After canceling their old service, they now have a new one. November 8th, he replies that everything is great. Family life had swept them away. I reply, how are the negotiations going with the producers? He replied on November 9th, I walked from it. Reasons of the spirit, I guess. November 16th, I asked him to join us at my sister's for Thanksgiving. November 18th, he replied that they wanted to stay home this year, but thanks. So this is the testimony Dan Crowley Sr. provides the law enforcement. And so what I'm going to do is highlight each one of these and then compare it with the notes. Now the AT&T phone record log, I've got a screenshot image right here of the texts that were sent and received from David Crowley's phone number with his new AT&T phone line. It shows the text coming in and the text going out. There's a lot of them here. It's 3 pages long, and I think there's a total of 77 texts David sends and or receives in this 3-month period, from October, from getting the phone, to November, to December, and then they end in December 24th is the very last text communication, and authorities believe the murders took place the 25th or 26th of this December, right around Christmas time of 2014. So all of these items mention the date range for these items are all November, beginning of November all the way through to the 18th. So what I'm going to do, not to make it too confusing for folks watching this broadcast, we're not going to go through all these. I'm just going to strip through the items that relate to the text activity for David Crowley in the month of November only. And here they are. If you see the line items on the AT&T bill on the far left, item lines 59 through 74 are connectivity dates for texts that range from November 3rd through November 22nd. And what follows on the next page is all items in December, which is not part of tonight's broadcast. So we're just focusing on November only. So first item here is early November. DJ texts David saying he loves him, wants to make things right. Incoming text, early November. Well, we know Dan Crowley's phone number, and we can see the in and outgoing communications here. Let's focus only on the incoming. I've got the incoming texts. There's, I think there's 12 of them. The first texts coming in are November 3rd, November 4th, and November 8th, it appears. So beginning of November, I'm guessing it's one of those three that are coming in. And so I'm going to pull up the spreadsheet of a simple version of these first three coming in. We can see the first three coming in from an individual named Richard Benedetti from Illinois. A couple of those coming in from him. Also, the beginning of the month was Zach Carter, a gentleman in Washington. So I don't see any support, any evidence to support a text coming in from DJ, which is Dan Jr. No response. So I would have to. I don't believe there's any support for that first item. Let's go to the second item. November 7th. I text David to see if he's still alive after giving DJ his new phone number. So let's go to November 7th. Incoming text. There is no incoming text. We see one on the 4th, and then and not again until the 8th. So I don't see anything there to support a text. This is coming from Dan Sr., wondering if he's still alive. Now, this also may be planting the seed of to the investigators that he was depressed, despondent, and what have you. But I don't believe there's support that exists for this text at all. November 8th, looks like David replies, everything's great, family had swept them away. And then Dan Sr., the father, replies, how are the negotiations going with the producers? So we get an incoming and an outgoing on the 8th. We do see some incoming and outgoing on the 8th. In fact, 4 of them in the blocked area here, right in the middle. There's 4. Zach Carter from Washington had some ins and outs. 1, 2, 3, looks like 4 texts back and forth from Zach Carter on the 8th. Nothing from Dan Crowley Sr., the father. Nothing from the father at all. Now we do get one from Dan Crowley Jr. on the 8th. That comes in around 11:07 p.m. that night. But this is Dan Crowley Sr. Mentioning this correspondence here, back and forth texts between him and his son. And so negotiations with the producers. Now we know David was in communication with MEG, the Michael Entertainment Group, about his movie. And so that's correct. He was in negotiations with them. Let's go to the next one. He replied, this is David now, alleging. David replied on November 9th, I walked from it. Reasons of the spirit, I guess. Now this one drew some criticism early on after we interviewed the president at Michael Entertainment Group, and saying that he never walked away from the deal, and Meg never walked away from David. They had a pending contract, a verbal contract, to move forward with this web series movie or project. And so this concept, this item drew criticism early on, saying I walked from it, reasons of the spirit, I guess, because there's no evidence to support that David ever walked from this at all. So we're wondering why Dan Crowley introduces this concept or this narrative here into the police reports. So he says on the 9th that he walked from it. And now we don't see any text here at all on November 9th at all. So no text on the 9th. Now the next one is November 16th. Dan Crowley Sr. asks, I asked him to join us at my sister's for Thanksgiving on November 16th. And as we can tell here, look back on the incoming texts. We do see the 15th, November 15th, and then nothing until the 20th. 15th and the 20th, so nothing on the 16th. In fact, if you look of who he's corresponding here, on the right side I've got listed underneath the who is who he's communicating with. There's no Dan Crowley Sr. at all. So there's 16 texts incoming and outgoing in the entire month of November on David Crowley's new phone. Never once does he send a text to his father, Dan Sr., who lives in Owatonna. And never once does he receive a text from Dan Crowley Sr. into David Crowley's. So there's no communication there at all via text. And there may have been phone calls in the phone records, but the point of this episode is strictly the text, the correspondence between the texts, between the father and the son. The next one, November 18th, he replied that he wanted to stay home this year, but thanks. So a nice comment there saying they couldn't make it, but thanks again for the invitation, Dad. And this is the 18th. He replied back. So let's go to the outgoing. Outgoing here I've got in the bluish color, and there's no outgoing calls. In fact, there's only 4 outgoing texts the entire month of November from David Crowley. And like I said, none included his father. So it doesn't. We can't even verify that there was an invite for Thanksgiving here at all by looking at this information. And by looking further into the different various names, we see a lot of Zach Carter living in Washington. Now, Zach Carter, if you remember, was with the Michael Entertainment Group. Zach Carter here is pictured second from the left, meeting with David Crowley here. I believe this was in L.A. With the contract negotiations in the summer of 2014. This image may even be from the fall, maybe September time frame, possibly even June. You can leave your comments below if you know the date, but it's sometime in 2014 with the negotiations with Meg. Now, Michael Entertainment Group is the company that's initials for MEG, Michael Entertainment Group. Both officers, their partners in the firm, are both named Mike. On the far left is Mike Boggio, and on the far right is Michael O'Donnell. Those are the two Mikes. They run an outfit called Michael Entertainment Group. Zach Carter is also working with them. He's pictured here with the reddish-looking goatee, second from the left. So we know that David Crowley is in correspondence with Zach Carter several times during the month. And gets a couple of texts incoming with no response from a Richard Devinadati, and then a couple from Dan Crowley Jr., which is David's older brother, that he doesn't respond to. and they were fighting at the time back in the month of August. And so that's why I believe that's why it sounds like they're trying to work on things there. The very first one says that's the reason for saying that he loves him, likes to make things right. These two were in some sort of conflict in August. And now we get into the end of November, and other than a couple of looks like potentially spam texts coming in there that don't have the regular 10-digit phone numbers. But what we're seeing here is what I see is two things. Number one, David Crowley has not ever sent a text in the month of November or received a text from his father in that month. The other thing, in looking back at these comments from Dan Crowley Sr. that he provides law enforcement, is it leaves the illusion that they're corresponding, that their texts are being sent back and forth, they're on good terms, they're chatting, and everything's fine with a lot of these conversations. But what we see in the evidence is that there's no correspondence whatsoever, much less conversations going on. And so what we're left with is to suspect, or is to really the question is to why would Dan Crowley Sr. lie to investigators? Why would he give this information to detectives when it's not accurate and not supported by the evidence or the facts? And so that's the main question. Why was that done? I don't know. We can only hope that when detectives followed up with these notes and narratives, when the police, when the warrants came back for these phone records, I'm assuming they followed up on each one of these instances. We don't have any narrative as far as what they found or what they concluded by these types of things, but we can only assume that they did follow up and ask Dan Sr. the follow-up questions as far as these things not making sense. But please leave your comments below. I just found this very interesting and wanted to get this out there. Once again, today is April 25th, 2019. My name is Dan Hennon. Thanks for listening. Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of The Gray Stage. This is episode number 16. I'm Dan Hennon. We're joined here today with Greg Fernandez, Jr., the author of the book, The Gray Stage. Also, Stephen, Catherine, and Sophia are here with us today. Welcome, everybody.
Greetings.
Well, we've got an interesting chapter today. It's chapter 9 for those following along in the book, in Greg's book. It's chapter 9, beginning on page 69 in the actual book. It's called Suspicious Activity, and so we'll go through this today on these items and have a little discussion on this. Suspicious activity. Here we go, page 69. I'll start off with the beginning. There's a subheading called Return to Return Again, and then a segment here in italics. Authorities were forced to return to the crime scene on 2 separate occasions to recover bullets not collected during the initial search of the Crowley home. Considering the circumstances surrounding this case, I found that highly disturbing. And yes, just to reiterate, Greg, I think we all do. It's very disturbing when you have a crime scene, when you have the detectives on the crime scene have to return to the case not once, to the scene not once but twice in a scene like this, in a very grisly, disturbing crime scene of a triple homicide, I call it, and not even to find all the evidence until a couple times, instances later. So continuing on January 19th, 2015, 2 days after the bodies of David, Komel, and Raniya Crowley were discovered, a neighbor called police to report suspicious activity at the Crowley residence. A 911 call was placed at 12:51 p.m. And remember, this is a Monday afternoon. Now, this is a Monday. The caller refused to give a name, but claimed to live a few houses down from 1051 Ramsdale Drive. in Apple Valley where the Crowleys lived. Now, 15 minutes prior to the neighbor calling authorities, a camouflage painted GMC Blazer stopped in front of the Crowley residence. An unknown male got out of the truck and tried to enter the house. Unfortunately, the caller was unsure if the man was able to get inside. The caller did not provide the license plate of the vehicle. The entire incident of suspicious activity lasted 16 minutes and 38 seconds. 2 Apple Valley police units were assigned to the incident at 12:52 p.m., and a 3rd unit was assigned 1 minute later. Now, the interesting thing with this section of the book here is this is the 19th, and for the listeners out there, we have to keep in mind that by this time, this was 2 days after the bodies were discovered, I had already set up the Justice for David Crowley and Family Facebook page that morning, the actual morning of the 19th, before all this took place. So the crime wasn't, I'll call it, the crime wasn't over. Greg, they had already kind of wrapped up the crime scene at the house. But by the time I created this Facebook page looking for justice for the family, this suspicious activity hadn't even happened yet. And I was busy inviting members and friends to join the page because this whole case just seems so bizarre. And now we've only hit 1/3 of the bizarreness even happened because we had police return 2 additional times. And so we got to keep in mind there that this page was already created and folks were talking about the case well before this incident that we're talking about here that afternoon even took place. Very interesting. Continuing on, at 12:56 p.m., Unit 4918 was the first officer to arrive at the Crowley residence. Unit 4918 noticed flowers on the front step. Unit 4949 arrived 3 minutes later, and Unit 4943 joined the other officers at 1 p.m. So we've got to keep in mind here that the crime scene, the bodies were taken out on that Saturday, late night Saturday, early morning Sunday. The detectives did their work on Sunday, took photos, and I believe on that Sunday night cleared the scene from a detective's perspective, and maybe Stephen, who's joining us here as well, could shed a little more light on that, how that all takes place, because the professional cleaners were already in there that Monday morning on the 19th before this episode took place. Were they not? How does that work?
Yeah,
as far as closing out the crime scene? The yellow tape was already removed, meaning that the crime scene was completed. I mean, the investigation on site was done. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, when they bringing the crime scene, let's say janitors, we used to call them, bringing them in, early is, it's their call and such. But I mean, a crime scene like that, I mean, that crime scene might be sealed for 2 weeks. If you're doing your job on that, if they were seeing what we're seeing now, so I don't know, ignorance or not, but we saw in the Marshall case how fast they brought in the crime scene and removed the yellow tape. Same kind of thing, in and out.
And so the one thing that's interesting, back on the 19th when this took place, when I created this page, some of the first comments that came on with people interested in is, what does it look like now? And then there was no photos available, but then some people started commenting right away by saying, well, there's no crime scene tape up. And so that was our first kind of alert where our antenna went up by saying,
Sure.
They've already pulled down the yellow crime scene tape already on a triple homicide, including a husband, wife, and a young child. And they said, yeah, it's all, I think it's being cleaned, now, and the tape is down. So that was one of the first things that got people really suspicious by saying, well, why would that be already? And then the cleaners were there, and now we get this suspicious activity, which none of us knew about this on the 19th that were covering the case until we received the FOIA request on this case, and it talked about the 911 suspicious call afterwards, on the 19th. The body's discovered once again on the 17th. So this really shed light because no one should have been in that house. Now what they do is leave a lockbox, I think, on the front door, and you can enter the correct combination to get the key, to get access to that key to get into the house. But that's mainly for family, immediate families to get in there if they need something. And so, we found out that the folks, as part of this, that friends of David's were already in that house. All right, so that's the first part.
Oh, wait, well, Dan, let me say something, just to digress for a second, is, if it's a serious crime, too, they'll have a patrol car or canvass the area more often. We'll put a lockbox on it, keep the tape up. They've already spoke to neighbors to tell them to keep an eye out. So you have eyes on this neighborhood now, and if they want to go back in, they go back in a couple days later or something. They just close this thing out way too early. But that's you're right.
And then the other thing that came up, I remember on the very first day when that Justice page on Facebook was created, that people were commenting about, hasn't there been a vigil, or will there be a vigil? Folks, neighbors standing outside with candles like you typically see, flowers on the front steps. And the folks that were there, that were close by, says, there's no plans for a vigil. There's no flowers on the front stoop, or nothing like that. And now we get this case that it's the first that we see here by the caller saying that there was, some flowers on that front stoop. But we were imagining, like I had said too, even with the little Raniya dying age 5, I said, was there stuffed bears, teddy bears, flowers, candles lit? Where is all this activity for a horrendous crime like this? And the folks said, well, I don't see anything. There's nothing there. And then when I drove by it, there was nothing there. And they said, a lot of that stuff where the flowers were left out was cleaned up, and picked up by family right away. So you never got that sense like you typically see on the evening news at a big mass murder or a shooting or a crime scene like this, where there's a big outpouring of support from neighbors, families, and friends. That's the one thing that really stuck out for me personally in a case like this. There was none of that. There was no nightly vigils.
My thoughts on that also, Dan, was at the Marshall House. There wasn't, they were young high school kids. There wasn't any sort of, mementos or flowers or pictures. There wasn't a lot out in front of that house either. And what I'm getting at is that tells, maybe these neighbors are, hey, pretty much, there may be some intimidation factor. Little kid dies. There's always teddy bears and stuff out there. So why there should have been more of that in cleaning up or not? How much evidence was there of any of it being out there anyway?
Yep, and that's true. When this all took place, I called it suspect, or I raised my antenna. But folks who got on that page and joined the justice group that were detriments or deterrents to that page said, why? Just because there's no flowers out there, you got to assume something's suspicious here? I said no, but it certainly leads you that way when it's already a suspicious, strange case like this. And remember, the first time I heard about this case, me personally, was the 19th, was the morning of the 19th. I didn't see it in anything in the news on the 17th when the bodies were recovered. Nothing on the news or the newspapers the next day on the 18th. And then a friend forwarded to me a link that morning of the 19th when I got to, the office. When I got to the office that Monday morning at work, I'm like, well, this sounds just like the Philip Marshall case. Looked into it a little bit. I did a couple quick searches on Facebook to see if there's a group that I could join to investigate, to look at this, or a memorial page or something about the family. And there was nothing about this case. And so I quickly put together I just created a group, and I got 25 I think members that first day or two, and that was really it. But then I logged back into work and I started doing my normal work stuff. But I just quickly created that page, and then I got contacted by Thomas Lapp, who said, you know what, I don't know who you are, but I created a justice page as well for David Crowley of Gray State. And I didn't know who he was. I wasn't sure what even the term Gray State even meant. I wasn't following the project or anything. He said, oh yeah, this project was going on, was big time for a couple of years. I said, well, I just did it for the sympathy and the empathy for the family. And so we both had pages created that morning of January 19th. Both were set up and running before the suspicious 911 call came, where all the shenanigans kept going on. Is there anything else there to address as far as a camouflage truck showing up? That doesn't raise anything alarming to me at first. It does once we know what came of this. But at first, if it was an unknown male trying to enter the house, strange. It's no big deal, I guess. Couldn't get in, and they couldn't get the license plate. But they simply called police because it was what I called, that's fair enough, it was suspicious activity. Now what they don't say, and we don't know if it was true yet, is what was they never said, did they hear a gunshot or anything, but the allegation is that some suspect, myself mainly, is that's when that gunshot went off to fire that hole in the ceiling because of the missing bullet. But never once does that person who called 911 say there was a gunshot heard. They just said there was a person trying to enter the home. So keep that in the back of our minds as well, because that hole was not in that ceiling as of this date yet, possibly on the 19th, but certainly not before, we don't think.
Are we certain on the date that the cleaners were inside the house doing their work? Because
we don't know.
wouldn't the father...
We don't know if it was the 18th or the 19th, but they were in already at this time, I believe, on the 19th, that morning. They were there, and I don't know if they came back from the afternoon on the 18th, that Sunday, or if they were initially beginning their work on the 19th. But they were in process, and we know that they didn't, conclude until I think it was the 20th. So we don't know when they started, unless, Greg, do you have any further info on that, or Catherine?
Well, we tried to contact them. They never answered that question. All that we wanted to know was what date did you guys start and what date did you guys finish, and we couldn't get.
And that's a very good question. And it's not anything they should be alarmed or afraid of answering. It's not a touchy subject. It's just simply the begin date and the end date of their work at that residence is all that you're asking. And I think that's a very fair question. And there might be someone out there now listening to this 6 years later that worked with them or with that group, and that's all that we're getting at. If someone could, comment on this video once it goes live, if they know of someone. We're looking at the start and the end date. We know it's multiple dates, but just to confirm with that cleaning crew when they started and when they ended.
Yeah, and their name is the Biotech Emergency Services, and that was a company that was hired. We know they were definitely there on January 20th, but beyond that, I can only guess.
Yes.
And the reason why I'm asking is because the bodies were discovered on the 17th. They were removed between around 1 a.m. in the morning, 1 a.m. or 1:30 in the morning. The autopsies were done that Sunday in the morning. Then calls were being made to family members late that afternoon and the next day, the 19th. So how are they able to get a cleaner that quickly into the house?
Well, that's the other question, I think, and maybe Stephen can elaborate on that as well, but the quickness of the cleaners being in that house should be raising all of our antenna for the quickness, for all of this, that they wanted to get everything clean quick. Now, is that something normal, Stephen, in a case like this?
No, not a case like this, because first off, we all agree there's not too many cases like this. So, having said that, we've cleared homicides and had cleaning crews there. Usually it's a couple of days, maybe 3 days. It's up to the detectives. If it's suspicious circumstances, maybe longer. There's maybe, because everything's a homicide until proved otherwise. But this here, no. It's like we go back to the Marshall case, same thing. I mean, the cleaner's in there, everything else, and then everything's gone. And if they're forced to go back into the house, oh well, there's nothing left or what have you. No, it's way too fast.
Now, Greg, I've got a question for you, Greg. Now, because we're six years later, and the neighbors in the area, some of these people typically are more willing to come forward the longer this goes. And so, if the neighbor, maybe the person that called themselves, that called 911, is now not afraid to come forward and even to give their name and to give a little elaboration to us on an interview or something, that'd be very helpful. But to this date, we still don't know who this person even was. They just said that they were not the immediate next door neighbors on either side of the home, but they were a couple of houses down.
Right.
I think what they did was correct. They called the authorities, said there was a suspicious, couldn't read the license plate, gave them what they gave, hung up, and didn't want to give their name. Well, I think that's all very good. I've got no problem with this person and the actions they took at all. It'd be nice to talk to see, what prompted, was there anything else surrounding this to make the call? But I think it'd be nice to talk to this person someday.
Yeah, I would love if that person could, if they're hearing this, if they can they can always contact Dan. They can always contact me. We would love to just hear more about what you actually saw that day. Why we're talking about a quote-unquote suspicious person and not persons. Maybe it's suspicious activity. Maybe that's a better way to say it. But we know that this person saw a GMC truck with army, quote-unquote, army paint on it, and a male got out. We would love to know more about who that male was. Were there any other people in that car? And this person says they were there for about 15 minutes before the person actually called. I don't know if, and that's the other thing, because I'm not sure, maybe it's on this document here, maybe we can find that out later. Did they call 911, or did they just call the Apple Valley Police? Because there's an incident number, a case number, can I safely assume it's the police?
I think, Greg, by getting that FOIA request that talked about it, and I'll get that to you, that screenshot, it showed to me by reading the details that it was, in fact, a 911 call that dispatch received, and then they sent the units out there. I don't think they just called the Apple Valley Police phone number or something to inquire about it, to mention it. But I think they did call 911. Now, that's very common in Minnesota here where I'm at, and maybe for you guys in other states as well, but I'm not sure if anyone calls a normal police phone number anymore. With anything that you've got, you just typically call 911 and let them direct the importance or what type of department needs to be involved, and let them do the work. So I'm assuming this person just rang up 911 on their probably the house phone or their cell phone, and then went from there.
Okay. That would make sense because of how much detail there is on this, and because it's a quote-unquote incident detail report. I just know that a lot of the witnesses, a lot of the neighbors were given the phone numbers of the cops. If they had anything more to add, I'm sure they were given somebody's card and they could call them. But yeah, it wouldn't correspond with anything here. So that was one of the first questions that I had when you first got this. I was like, okay, where is this a 911 call? But okay, what you're saying makes a lot more sense now that you say it.
And the next paragraph that I read already, as far as this incident lasting 16 minutes and 38 seconds, for the listeners out there that may not be familiar with this, Greg just used the timestamp of when the call came in versus the timestamp of when dispatch cleared the units, basically saying that there's nothing more to look into, nothing more to do. They closed the case, and it gives you a timestamp of when that happened. And so the difference between the two really is just your time that Greg came up with there.
Yeah, what I looked at there, that's a great question, because I was even going through this. I was like, wait a minute, where did I get this 20 minutes from? I was like, okay, here's where I got that from, is that the caller says that 15 minutes prior, so 15 minutes prior to when they call, this is what happened. So that's 15 minutes. The police or the call is made at 12:51. 48, so 12:52. The police arrive, I believe, it looks like the first officer gets there at 12:56. So that doesn't give them much time, so that's where I got that 20 minutes, because obviously by the time that the cop gets there, this person or persons are all gone. So anything that they did, that's all the time that they had for this call. Whether Correct. There was other people that entered the house later or prior, we really don't know. We just know that, well, this is the actual documentation that we do have.
And the other question I've got, Greg, is because this is middle of the day, essentially, nowhere in this report states that the cleaning crew was there, or the cleaning truck, van, or vehicles were there. And so we can't necessarily say that they were actively cleaning at that point, but we know that the cleaning had started either on the 18th or the morning of the 19th, and it closes it, and it wraps up on the 20th. But they would have been there. My question is, why wasn't the vehicle there, as far as cleaners wouldn't just come in and just work a couple hours in the morning and say, hey, we'll be back in the afternoon, tomorrow to do the rest? There would have been a vehicle there unless they were off at a lunch break, but that doesn't make sense either. So.
Well, that was why I thought, well, there's no way that the cleaners could have been here until the 20th. My guess.
That's the only time they mention it in the police reports too.
Right.
Is the 20th, because at 1 o'clock in the afternoon they call and say, hey, we found a bullet.
Right, and that rug had to have been one of the first things that the cleaners would have taken out of the house.
More than likely. Do we know then if the cleaners came on the 18th or 19th at all? Maybe they didn't.
We don't, unfortunately. Also,
and that's why
go ahead, Sylvia.
No, that's why it disturbs me that they were in that house when that house was even cleaned. It's a biohazard and everything, and they're in there.
And they're only in there for a short while, too.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, William. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, of course.
Hey, William.
Hello.
We're just covering just the first page of 69, and we're almost to the end of the incident report. Okay. So, if you have anything, feel free to join in, jump on in.
Oh, we'll do.
Awesome.
Sounds good, Greg. I can continue on with the in the book.
Okay. Stephen, did you have something to add?
Go ahead, Stephen.
Oh, no, guys, no, you did fine. We covered that or the show before last a little bit, too. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so now we're on the top of page 70 for those following along. It says, according to the incident detail report, it was, quote, unknown who was at the residence or why. It is not known if the person who tried to enter the house left the flowers, unquote. The incident was closed at 1:08 p.m. If the caller's timeline is correct, this gave the unknown male about 20 minutes to enter and exit the home before police showed up.
Now, it's very curious to me, Dan, how did they connect Chris Klein, the owner of this army painted truck, how did they connect that to him? And I hope we get some of that later on. We don't get too much of that, but obviously that was a really big question. And it seems like a lot of people were very quick to kind of throw Chris Klein under the bus, maybe? I don't know. There was a lot of suspicious things about him. His story didn't line up. We're going to get into all of that, so maybe I'm jumping the gun here. Just sticking with, if anybody has anything to add or any comments to make on this 911 call, and I'll make sure that everybody does have a copy, or Dan will make sure everybody has a copy of this soon.
Okay.
So what I did is I just took everything that I saw in this and tried to make it flow, put it into some form that would make it easy for people to kind of follow up and kind of see, okay, what happened, when, who did what, et cetera, et cetera. It would be really nice to know who called them, and I hope that person will maybe contact Dan, contact me, kind of help us out, give us some more details. And was this the only person, the only activity that they saw? Were they told, was anybody told by the cops to make sure if you guys see anything strange, call us? How typical is in California? I mean, I don't think anybody would even call for anything, but that's a whole other issue.
At this point, yeah.
It doesn't affect them, kind of thing, but
no.
All right. Well, Catherine, any thoughts on this call?
Oh, sorry, it took me a while to unmute myself. But no, I mean, you guys have covered it all. I really have nothing to add right now. Sorry.
It's okay. All right, I'm just going to scroll down to page 72, and Dan, if you want to read a little bit there, if anyone wants to jump in, please feel free. But here we go. This is it.
Okay, so this is now page 72 under the heading item 57. Continuing on February 17th, 2015, investigators were notified about a bullet hole in the living room ceiling. Based on that information, authorities returned to the Crowley residence on February 18th and found a bullet, item 57, in the attic above the living room. The bullet weighed 180.18 grams and is the heaviest of all 6 spent rounds. Like items 45 and 53, white material was also observed on this spent cartridge. The nose of the bullet was particularly expanded.
What does that mean? The nose of the bullet was partially expanded?
Stephen, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it probably deflected off of something partially. If it's something solid, it's going to expand a little more evenly, flat like a mushroom, even though it's going to be obtruse, But if it caught something, a nicker or side of a board or nail, it wouldn't be expanded all the way.
So I would assume that David's head is going to be the heaviest of all 3 people's heads, the biggest. Why does this bullet weigh more than any of the other bullets found if it hit David's head, hit his cranium, went through the ceiling, hit hard wood on the attic, and then bounced back down? I mean, I just kind of expect this one to not weigh so much.
My what? I think it actually caught a lot of the drywall. That material in there. I think it just basically gathered a bunch of that in. And then when it slammed in, it just kind of really compacted it and then just bounced where it did.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Thanks. Exactly, William. Yeah,
Thank you.
that's, and the thing is that and also, guys, is that the new ammunition, the stuff that's, cased in with a certain amount, there's so many great ammunition out of mushrooms, it doesn't lose pieces. It's best to stay together and go through and get a bigger hole. So it's going to pick up more stuff in mass because it's going to stay together. The more jacketed it is.
Right, and Greg, your comment was exactly always been my thought with this type of hollow point. If it's going to be striking a skull and then supposedly then after that going through a ceiling and then hitting joists in a roof, there would be more than a partially, I forgot the word, but it would pretty much be destroyed like the rest of the other ones, but this one seems to be pretty much okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel like, just because it went through all the different material, we had some plastic in there. It looked like it was some pretty tight, stapled down plastic, initially at least. And then, of course, you have the drywall, and then you also get to hit the...
Yeah, but that's all after it supposedly went through David's head.
Yes.
And so if it's going to go through the head, a hard surface, it will mushroom on impact. And then from that point forward, it should pretty much be mushroomed out completely, not just partially. And so and with that mushrooming, it's going to gather hair, skin, brain. It wouldn't just have white powder, and so... And I'm sorry, I don't mean to go off on a tangent about 57, but this one gets in my craw.
Would there be blood anywhere from the ceiling into the attic and all that? Should we expect to see any blood if it was shot through David's head?
Eventually.
Because, it sounds like because there was no blood found on this bullet, if you are going to try to believe what the police say, then what happened to this bullet must have wiped all of the the blood off.
And that's not how it works. I mean, once it's mushroomed and gathered inside of those pulled back portions, it stays within those sections of that mushroomed fragment. And so the fact that they found nothing other than white powder and some supposed DNA, which they don't even clarify, but zero blood, it's like, so we know it didn't go through David's head. So it would make more sense, like what William was saying just a second ago, that a partial expanding, or whatever the terminology was, would then make more sense if it's just been shot directly through the drywall, the ceiling, and then it hits part of a joist or bounces off of something. That makes sense. But for them to expect me to believe it went through David's head, I call foul.
I would like to see a photo of item 57 as is, because it seems like the only photos we have are just of it lodged into the attic. Go ahead.
My thought here is, the only way, and I do mean the only way I think this would be possible to fit the narrative, I believe, is it went through just nothing but soft tissue. So, maybe going through the temple or something like this, like an area where it's a lot softer. I think it's possible.
Through the cheek, maybe?
That's another possibility. Just, basically just going through just very soft areas. I think it's
not going to kill him if it goes through the cheek.
Exactly.
But you see, there's, then that still leaves, and I would not go along with that thought process from the police's perspective. I understand you're tossing that out there as a thought, but then that still leaves the fact of, well, where's the bullet that killed David? Because if it only went through supposed soft tissue, then it wouldn't have. Where's the bullet that went through his skull? There's external beveling and an exit wound, so we know one went through his skull. Where's that one? And they've never produced it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was looking for anything in their notes anywhere that would say that they found just some type of blood on the ceiling, in the living room ceiling. Even in some of the photos when we first got them, I was like, oh, that does look like blood, but they don't mention it. I think if they did find blood there, they'd probably mention that. There's no blood on the ceiling, period.
Yeah. And we got some on the wall, which is untested. So we don't even know whose that is anyways, but it's the whole thing that there's nothing on the ceiling, that doesn't make any sense. Especially if you shoot himself in the head, you'd expect for that right there to line up. It's already going to be kind of a strange angle as is.
One of the Gray State goons said that the reason why there's no blood is because of that Christmas tree, that there was a lot of blood on that Christmas tree. But if that were true, wouldn't that have been documented?
Yeah, exactly.
It would have been removed from the house and not left there.
That's true.
Just like they removed the couch and the carpet and everything else.
Bingo. If we go off of what some of the other theories are, there's brain matter all over on that tree as well, too. You look at the tree, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing.
Right, and there's nothing to the left or the right or above or below that tree. So what? The tree just happened to catch a 2-foot. That's the only place that the spatter went. I don't buy that.
Yeah, like I said, if they would have tested item 33. I don't recall seeing any tests on the little blood that was for the Peleos cage either. They should have tested those things. Once again, if that is how it went down, you'd figure they would have went and tested that. That's the only way that you can prove that, he indeed, potentially killed himself, or at least that is his blood, at the very least. So.
I agree. Sorry, again, it took a while to unmute me, but I agree with everything you just said, William.
Oh, thank you.
Shall we keep reading on?
All right, continuing on. Quote, characteristics of the whole, BCA crime scene lead Joe Cooksley wrote in his report, quote, and its surrounding area indicated that a projectile was traveling generally west to east as it entered the ceiling and exited in the attic, unquote. After examining, go ahead.
No, that was a big thing because I was trying to figure out, okay, west to east. West to east. Does that line up with where this bullet hole is and everything, and where David's body was found, I guess. That's just a random thought. Sorry, sorry.
No, it's all good. I'm trying to think. I could have sworn they did it on the police drawing, where they actually they put I think it was One Direction.
The music band?
No. Nothing that lame.
Is it okay if I ask Stephen a question about that real quick right here? And the way that the hole is shaped in the ceiling. Now, when a bullet strikes the surface like that, is the wider end the point of impact, or is it the narrower end the point of impact? Do you know?
Well, it's going to be the narrow. The tip of the bullet is going to be the point of impact, and that mushroom should be wider than the bullet itself. And it will lose weight or it could gain weight, like William said, depending on what it hits. And by the way, for them to go up there and try to scavenge blood and things like that, I don't see these guys doing that up in some roof joists or inside the sheetrock up there. I don't see them going that far.
Yeah, especially not within a short time frame too.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I don't see brain matter. I mean, there could be some. I mean, it's hard to say. The brain matter going up that high at that angle, that far away, maybe 12 feet away up at an angle. I don't, it's tough to say,
Okay, so when we're looking at this photo, I'm sorry, when we're looking at this photo right here, where it's just a small indentation before it goes into a full-fledged hole. So where that small indentation is where the tip of the bullet would first then hit there, and then the trajectory pattern. Okay, thank you. I've been worried about that.
Oh, and guys, a hollow point going through, let's say left to right as an in and out on a skull shot. You look, the hole's the size of a silver dollar on the exit. That means that thing had a mushroom extensively on impact. They made the mushroom on the first impact. They made the maximum damage in flesh is at the beginning. So, it can hit bone. They'll still go through and get through an arm and ulnar radius. Femur maybe close distance. 45 at maybe 25, 30 feet might enter femur or hip and it may not exit. It'll still blow the heck out of it. But through the skull or something, that's, if you look at the wounds on Google, to head wounds by calibers, the exit wound is just so much bigger, so much larger.
Stephen, I have a question. This is Dan. I had in the past suggested one of our listeners or a member of the group try this test, and I haven't had anyone successfully do it yet. But just to get a piece of sheetrock and a .40 caliber Springfield handgun and fire for instance, 3 shots directly into the sheetrock using a hollow point bullet, and then do 3 shots of, for instance, a coconut sitting on a table, 3 coconuts, firing that, and then to see the impact of behind that when the hollow point would have expanded, to see the diameter of the hole in the sheetrock, and then compare the two, average size hole of hitting nothing first versus an average size hole of hitting the coconut, in this case, resembling a head, to get the difference. And then measuring this up with the ceiling hole to see, did it hit anything or not? And I think the answer would be, in the Crowley home, that hole in the ceiling did not go through anyone's skull. It had not yet mushroomed. Was what my point was. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you're so right. I mean, imagine, you can put your fist through a sheetrock wall. I mean, most of us can, right? No stud on the other side. And so that's the same resistance for that. And then when you go to a skull or a coconut, like you said, or what have you, I mean, and it's not a gelatin, a ballistics thing. It's not, center mass. This goes through a head. Your skull is a lot harder than sheetrock. So Dan, you're right. It's going to, as soon as it impacts, it's going to expand.
Well,
so that did not go. There's no way that went through a skull, 2 sides, and went up there. Could have deflected off maybe his forehead a little bit and guided itself. I still think it was a deflection shot. Maybe I still think possibly maybe it was Raniya. Maybe that threatening thing I had earlier, that theory that they threatened her, and there was some sort of activity in the house. But that shot is really that's the mystery shot. But no, Dan, you're right. Sheetrock, it could go through and not expand like that. Absolutely.
So just to kind of expand on this, I guess, no pun intended, I actually did get the dimensions of the shot of that actual area right there. So basically, what we got about 4 centimeters right here. I mean, I got the dimensions of like the bullet just by itself, of course, not with an expansion, of course, but it's about 4 centimeters all the way across, and then you also get about 2.5 centimeters roughly. It's all kind of rough guesstimate here, but just kind of coming down a little bit. That's basically like how wide and all this is. But on top of that, if you also consider the hole, I mean, it does. I mean, you do have a point here that this doesn't look like the thing had necessarily expanded. It just looks like it was just kind of fired in and just like that might have expanded out there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, keep in mind that the photo that Greg has up right now was after they actually put their finger in it and kind of made the hole bigger. And they have this in their notes. So the initial photo where it shows just the small divot, that one, the one he just had up there, the first one of the close-up. That one. You see the difference? So that's the original right there. And then the other one is that one right there is when they put their finger in it and was manipulating the hole.
Okay, I got
So they're looking for the bullet up in there. That's what they were doing, feeling around for the bullet, huh?
Yeah, very possible.
Yeah. This is already
in the meantime, making it much larger and wrecking the evidence at the same time.
Well, you can also see too, like there's the black markings on there. So
manipulating a crime scene like that.
I mean, that's my little problem I have with it is you can definitely see some discoloration here, and it looks more black than red or anything like this. So, do you think maybe they just kind of took something just to kind of silence the hell out of it, and then just kind of shoot it into that, have it go through here? Is that maybe a possibility?
Like we say, at that close range in that small of a room or what have you, and somebody misses like that and it's going up, we know it didn't go off somebody's head or in or out. That was a miss or a threat shot or something. And you know what? Nobody went it back in there maybe afterwards and, had a lone shot 2 days later, possibly if they think they did or not, to clean something up, because I don't think anybody would still be alive. And why risk getting caught to throw some round out there and wake up the neighborhood for no purpose? And I still think it was a warning. I think they maybe poor Raniya, they had a gun to her head and Dad went nuts. I mean, I think they suffered, man. I think David was saved for last.
Oh yeah.
I think
it's fair to assume, just looking at the body decons. I mean, David's midsection was definitely still very flesh-colored, while the rest of them were not.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what with Sophia kind of thought that, and that's not the worst angle. Maybe they, held Raniya and Komel hostage in the house, and they got David. But why remove him? Throw him in. Why he would not let them do that physically to him. So I think still everything kind of happened in the house, but. It was a sloppy crime scene, so it's not, I don't know, I'm sure it wasn't professional.
Well, Greg, we've reached the hour mark. Did you want to keep going? I'm trying to keep you on.
Have we really already? That's ridiculous.
I'm just trying to keep you on schedule.
You're right, I believe it.
Hey, Greg, you know what? I think for the listeners, maybe go back and digress just a little bit on some motive or something, to catch them up, and maybe, I know I've gone back and forth a little between straight on, shadow ops, deep state hit, which I know for sure didn't happen to, the people involved in the screenplay and the project and and all that kind of, it's so, I mean, maybe, when Apple Valley didn't do their job with how they involved on either side of the people involved in the project, or was it a gray state and they used the people in the project as pawns to go ahead and do this? There's a lot of different variables on that,
Oh, there's tons. I mean, they could have been framed. They could have been set up. That could be why they're so quiet. Is they were told, you guys better shut up, or else we're going to blame you for it. Well, I don't really know. What I know is how quickly they started saying that David Crowley was guilty, which to me is still baffling. It's still one of the most basic things that I would just think that in law enforcement you don't do. You just don't do.
It's like when Philip Marshall was, most of the community was chastising, Philip about, this guy was nuts and he was on some drugs or some sort of depressive pills and killed his kids and blah blah blah. I mean, he didn't do it. We know that, but they went after him.
Yeah, but
right away too.
I think within the first couple of weeks, You know, the first couple weeks up there, it was a little similar to the David Crowley case in the first couple days, because Dan was really around in the background when there was a lot of background people who really wanted to understand what was happening. They were going to do calls. They were going to do live things. They were going to do pretty much what we're doing now. Right, Dan? There was a whole group of those people. And with Philip Marshall, there was neighbors, there were people in that area, especially in those first weeks, because I was there. I think I was there that weekend. And when I went back two weeks later, it was like everybody had been told to just shut up. Nobody wanted to talk about it. We almost got a couple people to actually talk about it, and they got scared off. And I see a lot of similar things with this David Crowley case. Why are so many people so intent on making sure that everybody knows that they believe David Crowley is guilty? Were they told that? You know, are they sending a message to people that had threatened them? So even though because come on, it's common sense. It's common sense that David Crowley is not guilty. So there's a lot of theories and a lot of motive for why people would keep their mouths shut. But as far as the actual crime and who all did it and everything, I just that's for me, that's still phase 2, and I'm still on phase 1.
You know what? I'll continue.
You know, when I go back to Apple Valley, man, is, you know, they're just not straight on this. I mean, there's got to be a couple good cops in that department or something, but for them to control that, the biggest murder in the history of that town, and suspicious murder at that, the guy's, you know, writing stuff that the deep state wants him dead. I mean, you know, this is a big deal in a little town, just like Marshall was up there, and it's the same Stepford wife thing, and they get to him like a couple days later, and one neighbor talks to another. Maybe they got anonymous emails, you know, or whatever, and people are not going to talk, and that's what it becomes. And, you know, who's going to go up to Apple Valley? Attorney General Ellison sure isn't. I mean, you got to go up the ladder. You got to go to Senator Grassley. I'll tell you what, that's who you go to. He was oversight for the law enforcement in the United States. He was involved, you know, he criticized Waco, Ruby Ridge, and Yosemite case. And this is the case, maybe we write him a letter, you know. He's a great guy.
That's a good idea.
He's oversight on law enforcement. He's pretty much the guy that, you know, really can haul in guys like Ellison and make them, you know, make them raise their right hand.
Yeah, he may have some motive to make that happen. You never know.
You know, hey, I mean, during the Yosemite case, Grassley came out. It was in the paper. It said it's the worst bungle in the FBI since Ruby Ridge and Waco about the Yosemite case we did. That's pretty strong for somebody to come out and say that, and this is a ranking majority member, you know. Wow, thank you.
So my theory on this, I got 2 things to say real quick. So, first thing, I definitely do think this is bigger than just if they're the GS guys, you know, the Gray State guys are involved, then I feel like this is much bigger than them. I don't think necessarily, like, I think Steven's onto something there. Basically, these guys, if they are involved, you know, just that opinion there that they are involved, then once again, it's fair to assume, I mean, this is why it looks like crap, you know, but on top of that, why it doesn't also look like a government hit. But also, were they given the orders to do so by somebody else? Potentially, especially since you got to consider the Freemason and occult connections with Danny August Mason and Hendricks. Not to mention, you got some of the Freemasons that are in the Apple Valley Police Department. So, is this, you know, some kind of a hit that way? Potentially. I don't think we can fully rule that out all the way yet. But the other thing,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
With this case, like I said, we can compare this to Hancock, which is right down the street from here, or from David's house. And if you look at how quickly the Hancock case was solved, I mean, those crime scenes, I mean, they didn't look like eerily similar, but there were some similarities there. But they, you know, they had a lot of the same detectives on it. You know, you look at, well, what's missing here? Well, you had Captain Burnwell wasn't on that case. At least when I read on it, I didn't see Captain Burnwell at all. But you know, that was just pretty much just in and just done. They were able to call it really easy, you know, quick and easy to call. A lot of the same kinds of they had some similarities when it came to the crime scene too. So kind of feel like this is we can kind of compare that. You know, why was this so? Why did they take a little longer on this one, but on Hancock it was just just in and then done. You know, really in and out. So.
All right, Dan, you want to keep reading here?
Yes. Continuing on, it says, after examining the bullet hole in the living room ceiling, authorities found item 57 in the attic above the living room near the front door. There was no blood on this bullet. And let me repeat that. There was no blood on this bullet, but the nuclear DNA profile matched David Crowley. The DNA profile did not match Komel or Raniya, period. So that's a huge statement right there. No blood on this bullet. And let's keep in mind, it's a hollow point bullet that's going to be gathering brain matter, tissue, everything along the way. There was not a single drop of blood on it. Okay, continuing on. An email exchange between BCA analyst Catherine Roshi and Detective Tommy Booth stated no one had been charged with committing a double murder-suicide. Quote, good morning, Catherine, Detective Booth wrote on February 17th, 2015 at 8:04 a.m. Quote, nobody has been charged in this case, so I'm giving you permission to use up some evidence in its entirety for DNA analysis. If you need anything else, please feel free to contact me. Thanks for all your hard work, end quote. Anything there?
Yeah, that was a big thing for me because nobody has been charged in this case. And I'm like, okay, wouldn't that be evidence of David Crowley's innocence? First of all, if no one has been charged, and then of course we see there's no one that they can ever charge. They can never charge. Let me rephrase that. They could never charge David Crowley simply by the fact because he's dead, right? But it's just weird the way that they phrase that to say that no one has been charged in this case. I would think maybe they would have said the suspect is deceased or something like that. But to me, it's just one of some of those little things that just kind of made me think, I wonder if they were secretly looking into other people during this time, or after they found this, after they were notified, because they weren't notified of a bullet in the attic. They were notified, the police, as we're going to read, the police were notified of a hole in the living room ceiling. It's a big difference, but I'll save that.
I would say, Greg, this is Dan, maybe Stephen could expand on that, but when you do a DNA analysis, you use up that portion and you can't, use it again. And so if there's suspects or if it's a big case, it limits how many more times in the future you can use some blood or spatter for analysis. And this time, I think she was just saying, and she probably didn't use the correct verbiage in her quick email that she wrote that morning, but just by saying, no one's charged, so feel free to use it all up, I think is what she meant. But she says, you have my permission to use up some evidence in its entirety. I think she was just basically saying, you got the green light to use all of it if you want to do your test because we're not going to need it in the future, is what my interpretation of what she meant there. Does that kind of jive?
You know what? I'm not. I've been out of law enforcement for a while, and I'm not a DNA expert. But I mean, the verbiage is a little confusing. But we know they lacked gathering physical evidence in that home. We know that it wasn't extensive. They missed a lot of things. Blood here, blood there. They should have plenty of samples. They, like when they do an autopsy of a liver or something, they take several slides. Although those aren't usually, burned on the for DNA kind of stuff, but it doesn't take much of a sample to get a DNA match. It's so small, so minute,
Perfect. Okay, continuing on. Attempting to connect item 57 to the alleged murder weapon, authorities compared the bullet recovered to a bullet fragment found in the living room labeled as item 31. Originally, the bullet fragment labeled 31 was not included in the firearms examinations. Period.
And I'm not sure why. I mean, again, it's kind of weird that they would be comparing item 31 which is a quote-unquote fragment, to a bullet, unless they thought that item 57 was also a fragment. That was my first thought, until I saw this image that we're going to talk about next, so you can keep going on.
All right, the next heading is suspicious activity here. Quote, I spoke with Joe Cooksley, BCA analyst. Lisa Kinsella wrote on April 14th, 2015 at 10:14 a.m. Quote, regarding item 31, labeled as bullet fragments, end quote. It isn't included in the FA assignment. We discussed that I will add the item 31 to the FA assignment and document it and examine it for suitability comparative exams, period. The bullet fragment labeled as item 31 weighed 19.14 grams. The fragment was noted to have a, quote, hair-like substance, end quote, and a torn jacket. The fragment was compared to items 42, 44, 45, 53, and 57, but not item 43.
So that was another thing. Going back to the actual weight. Look at the difference of the weight between item 57 and item 31. Maybe it's not relevant because, again, what we're going to see with this next photo, maybe that's why I'm making too much out of it than I really should have. But I don't know why I keep going back to that weight. Now, it did have a hair-like substance, is what they were saying. Like that was 31, but not 50. Not 57. So, and it's interesting that they would not compare it to item 43. Maybe again, that's because I don't know. I really don't know why not compare it to item 43.
Right.
Maybe budget reasons, right? But this is a bad image because with the images that we got, and this is in the most recent BCA 488 page document that we got. And so it was a Xerox copy, so copying it over onto the book obviously is just like there's almost no reason to. But what they're doing here is on the left side, you're looking at item 57, and on the right side, you're looking at item 53. And that's what they use to say, this little portion, this little rectangle box here, this is what they use to say that item 57 was shot by item 1. So this is how they prove that item 57 was shot by David Crowley's gun, and therefore they assume, since that, then it must have been David who shot it, and then this must have, I don't know how that leads to the bullet is the one that killed David, but that's what they're looking at. So looking at these grooves, people who know about this stuff and study this stuff, they may say, yeah, the police were right on. Or they may say, you know what, some of these lines don't match up, because to the human eye, to my human eye, some of this stuff just doesn't seem to match up.
Now, now this is called your lands and grooves testing, correct? To line them up under a microscope to see if it was fired from the same weapon, and it appears here that they were. And so they'll do this. But here they just take the two existing shots that were fired. And I don't know, as Stephen, do we see anywhere that someone in the test laboratory fired David's weapon, the actual Springfield, with one of his hollow jackets, and then line it up with one of these to make sure that that's actually the image it produces when the shots are fired from it, fired into the water or something, and then pick that piece up and then throw it under a microscope. Here they're comparing two bullets that found at the scene, but the same conclusion. They're doing their homework to ensure that it lines up.
Well, we also have to be careful.
Looks like it pretty much does.
Because item 31 is it's never called a bullet. It's always called a fragment. So is there a difference between a bullet and a fragment? Because item 31 is not credited with killing anybody, shooting at anyone. So is item 31 a fragment of one of the other bullets?
The terminology, a bullet is the casing and the projectile together. That's a bullet. Separated, you have a casing, and then when it's shot, it would be it's a fragment.
Okay, but they're calling all of the other ones are called a spent round, and item 31 is never called a spent round.
Oh, really? Oh, okay, it's called a fragment.
It's called a bullet fragment. That's right.
bullet fragment.
That's it.
That means it probably. That's interesting. I'd have to check. And I mean, their terminology might be a little different, but I think that's correct. Spent round, yeah, it's a spent round, but it's still a fragment of whatever, you know. It's a spent round. They didn't say spent bullets, so it's a round. It's
correct.
Really, so
right.
the bullet casing round spent. Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds right.
Greg, where was 31 found, or which bullet was that again?
31 was a fragment that was found closest to the south wall, so to the front living room wall. Mm-hmm. That's where 31 was found there.
But who did that one kill?
No one.
Okay.
No one.
But that was the one fired through the floor, or not?
No. That was just a fragment that they found in the living room. If I go back.
Oh no! I am so sorry. I understand now. So no, that'd be a partial spent round. Absolutely.
Yeah. So here's where 30.
So, yeah.
Now, I mean, So that was the thing. Okay. Well, why are they comparing this one? Like, wouldn't they? Because Dan, you are right. They did have 2 test fired bullets. So they had 2 test-fired bullets that they could use to compare the 2 test-fired bullets from, or spent rounds from all of the other spent rounds.
And the final, let's see. According to the BCA firearms report, quote, item 57 against item 31 show the presence of matching features. This means that item 1 fired 31, end quote. And so that's kind of a leap you're getting at there, Greg, saying that it shows simply some presence of some matching features. They're going on to conclude that it's definite that it actually did it. And I think what you're getting at, Greg, is that they're basically saying, well, it's close. And then the very next statement is they're saying, therefore, this case is closed because it is what it is. And that's a stretch, very much a stretch the way they got it. The phrasing is crafted very interesting the way it's stated here, and it's not a normal sentence here. Would it be in the law enforcement jargon, Stephen, as far as a detective saying, this is close, but so therefore it is?
No. It's not conclusive. You can mention it in another phrase or another paragraph or just your thoughts.
They're going out of their way to say that it's conclusive and definitive is what they're getting at here. Sure. I don't think that it necessarily is. So why would they do that? They're backing into their own theory that they called this a double murder suicide. Therefore, they're going to find the evidence now that supports that rather than finding the evidence of the actual case.
Exactly, just looking at like a bias, basically.
Yeah.
And then also, let's look at how much time they spent on David with his autopsy or samples or the crime scene. Did they remove him last? I mean, I'm not sure if you guys might know about that. Which body was moved first? Which one was left in there afterwards? They may have looked over David's body more. I don't know. It's just such a sloppy crime scene. That's the biggest thing I see. It just I've never seen anything like it. And I see a lot of hate in there. I don't see a professional hit team. I mean, it's just. I think it's his buddies.
It's emotion is the thing that jumps out for me, and that wouldn't be the case in a professional hit.
Yeah. No, God, no. There's a lot of hate. Yeah, it's definitely emotion and hatred or whatever. Yeah.
So the order of the bodies were tagged and placed in the body bags. We know that there was Raniya. She was first at 12:55 a.m. David was second at 12:58, and Komel at 1:10.
Okay.
And then, of course, at 1:15 they left with the bodies. So.
Wow.
So Komel was last. That's interesting.
Right.
Could you repeat those times again, William? What time was Raniya put in the bag?
12:55 a.m. and then David was 12:58 a.m. and then Komel was 1:10 a.m. And I know I looked at the time like, wait, what? 3 minutes in between here and then 12 here? What? This doesn't make any sense.
Especially with the amount of time that they were supposedly decomposing and the condition that their bodies were in. The times do not make sense at all. It's like it was like wham, bam, thank you, ma'am.
Exactly. Well put.
That's right.
Well, if you figured they were taken maybe probably different vehicles, maybe I'm assuming, but that means there's transportation. There might be one comes here. It fits in a time where they totally remove the bodies very quickly.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Well, I think just the last thing that I want to just mention about, because the comparing of item 57 to item 31 has just been something that I just never have been able to grasp. They have all of these other bullets. If they're comparing item 31 to 57, is it safe to guess that if they were to compare the other spent rounds to 57, that it wouldn't match up? I mean, shouldn't we see matches between all of these spent rounds with item 57?
Mm-hmm.
You definitely assume. I mean, that would be a thorough investigation. This is not thorough at all. They're just trying to go and just, like Sophia said, just the wham bam thank you ma'am. That's what they're trying to do with this case.
Yeah, Mike.
I still.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I still think there was two firearms used.
Yeah, that's what it seems like, because like Dan was saying, it's like, why are they comparing those two, but not with the test fragment? That's what they should be comparing it to, but they didn't. So they found something.
Right, exactly.
So, Greg, they'd also, if it was a thorough investigation, like William said, is they'd compare the 3 bullets found that went through Raniya and Komel, the 1 bullet fired that was found in the basement, the 1 bullet fired in the attic, all of them would match. But then you would suspect the first ones would, and then you go the extra mile to make sure that 57 matches, just to make sure there's not a second weapon used. But then you'd compare them all to a test-fired shot in the lab from David's gun that was done by investigators later. All those would match the lands and grooves if that was the case, and that would be a full investigation to make sure they fired a spent weapon that they've done in the lab would match all the ones collected at the scene. Now, because these are hollow point bullets, Stephen, would they not be large enough to be able to, under a microscope, to actually see the lands and grooves to get a shot like this? And so maybe that was the number 31 was the best one to use? Or in an investigation like this, they wouldn't have to use up, space with getting all these screenshots and images with, items, 5 different items. So they just did this one just to show, look, we've done our homework and it's good to go.
Yeah, no, I mean, they need more angles. I mean, those lands and grooves should line up almost like straight lines. I mean, and that's how you test it. And, that means to me is there was 2 weapons used, and there's more than one shooter. One man wasn't in there with 1 gun, and there's 2 to 3, maybe 4 people in there and they all had weapons. David had, there's somebody tried to get to the weapon and he, we know about the lockbox in the bedroom. It should match, and that's why, there should be several photographs matching up ballistics.
Gotcha.
Well, especially if you consider the blankets on the. Well, I mean, I guess the crime scene was kind of jacked up anyways, as the police kept moving things. But I mean, we'd have to if we have the photos of what it looked like before. I mean, I believe weren't all the blankets on the bed? Weren't they initially?
The blue blankets, or?
Yeah, in the bedroom. Were they all on the bed initially, or were they already thrown off? I feel like that could tell us something there, because if the blanket's are already off, then maybe he kind of dove onto his bed, got it real quick, and then hopped up and was ready to go.
Greg, this is Dan. I've got a question for Stephen in this case. Stephen, by looking at the image that's on the screen now for the lands and grooves, I have 2 questions just to clarify what you were saying. Are you saying that this image here looks to you in your eyes that the lines do not match up? Or are you saying that they match up, but because they didn't give us the comparisons of the other ones, that maybe this is the best one that fit and they let the other ones go on purpose not to show the public?
Oh, yeah, quite. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this thing's a cover-up. Absolutely. Anything you suspect that is out of the ordinary, we've dissected this case for months, and you know about it for years, is anything that should be there and isn't there is a cover-up.
But does the lines match up to you? I'm not. I don't have a background in this, so it looks like to me that this lines up these 2 lands and grooves. But
yeah,
you do think they match up?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. I thought you were saying maybe that you were alluding to maybe that they don't. Okay, gotcha.
Oh no,
Okay,
the laws, you're not going to get all the lines matching up, but you get to go from the middle out and look at those too.
Now,
That's
would
how I
this be
looked at them.
something, Greg, that we could file another FOIA request to Apple Valley to say we'd like to see the lens and grooves tests of the other bullets that were not presented in the 488-page report? And they would write back and say, yeah, here they are, or they'd say, no, everything that we did was in the report.
Yeah, this would be with the BCA, which we have. They've been a little more open. So yeah, I'll definitely make a note of that now, and we can.
That's a good question. Yeah, I'd like to see the other remaining 4 bullets compared to each other and compared to 1 or 2 test firings that they did, assuming they did, or maybe they didn't. And maybe by filing the FOIA request that way, they may come back and say, we didn't do any testings back at the lab.
Okay,
and that could get to our answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I know we had asked for maybe we were going to ask for maybe color photos or just better photos, not Xerox photos, which is what it looks like we actually got. So, okay, yeah, I'll make a note of that.
That's a fair question. That's good.
All right.
Stephen,
any final?
Go ahead. Actually, I have a question.
Yes.
Stephen, if there were 2 handguns that were exactly like David's, and David, okay, for instance, David and Komel had the same exact gun, and then David sold Komel's to one of David's friends.
Mm-hmm.
And if that gun had been cleaned exactly the same way that David's gun had been cleaned and fired with the same type of ammunition, would they have similar markings would they leave similar markings on the bullets?
Similar,
but
different. The lands and grooves would be different, would they not?
It's distinctive. Yeah, Dan say they're distinctive. It's like a fingerprint. There's close fingerprints. The DNA thing's a billion and one, but fingerprints kind of get close. But there's distinctions, and they definitely each weapon's like a fingerprint, like Dan's saying.
Okay.
So Sophia, just to conclude that, no matter if they bought it, cleaned it, serviced it, fired the same exact weapons, would they be similar? Is what I think. What Sophia was questioning, and the answer is no. No matter what you do, they'd still have their own identification on the lands and grooves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Okay, just wanted to make sure because.
But that's a good question. That kind of stuff has come up before, and what I have alleged all along is that David's gun that he owned was laid there at the scene and may not have been fired at all. And a similar weapon, with a silencer was the one used for all these, including the one in the attic, which is still out on the loose today. But then the question would be the lines and grooves wouldn't line up at all. They'd be similar, but maybe just similar enough like this, where they said it was similar, but then they incorrectly concluded that it was definitive this gun. That's where the question lies. That's all I've got.
Any final words, anybody? Speak now, or forever hold your peace till next month.
Yeah, the next month's podcast, Greg, is going to be a good one because then we get into the actual person rather than the suspicious activity in the home. We're actually getting names and dates of actual people to focus in. So I'm looking forward to that episode.
Me too.
Oh, it's gonna be a good
All
one.
right, thanks, guys.
Hey, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Greetings and welcome once again. Just a little preview here of what we're going to cover on June 1st for the next podcast. I believe this is podcast number 18, just from the regular shows, not including the bonus shows or the archive stuff that you'll find. Plenty of all that coming too. But regarding the podcast here, I was thinking about it, and we may actually have to break this up into 3 parts. So I think with the living room one, we did 4 parts of that. So last month we covered, on May 1st, we covered the suspicious activity chapter. minus item 53. So technically this would be the third part of the suspicious activity chapter of my book, The Gray Stage. So now we're getting into the people who were inside the house on January 19th, 2015. Because there's some conflicting reports about who was and who was not in that house. So that's going to be the main focus. What do people say? Who says what? And how come once again with this case their stories don't seem to line up? Go figure. How many times in this case are we going to see that? Everybody has a story, and they're all different. They're all, they don't line up. How else do you say that? I could say it in many different ways, but that's what it really comes down to. The stories simply do not line up, and they should. And they should. If everybody's telling the truth, the stories should line up. Well, guess what? Big bombshell information, my friends. They don't line up. Well, we're going to see why. We're going to see what the documents say, what Mason Hendricks has said, and I guess we go from there, right? This goes back to the 911 call that was placed on January 19th. Not when the bodies were found, but 2 days later is what we're talking about. Now, according to Mason Hendricks, nobody was in the house until the cleaners, until everything was cleaned. We know that that's not true, because we know that the cleaners were still in the house on January 20th. And this incident that we're going to talk about is January 19th, when Mason Hendricks, Adam Schambauer, Danny Mason, possibly Sean Wright, and maybe some other people too, depending on who you listen to. Oh, definitely Chris Klein. Gotta have Klein in there. But Chris Klein says that also David's father and David's brother were there. David's father says he was not there. So there we go. Now, we also don't know if this was the same, if all these guys were in the house, if this is the same time that we're talking about the 911 call. Did they come back? How long were they there? What were they doing there? What were they looking for? So it's still, you know, when I try to match up the timelines and everything, something still does not make sense. Because you have Judy Prochnow, who was saying that Mason Hendricks was also there during this 911 call with Chris Klein. Hendricks pretty much says that's not true. So, and when I asked him why, you know, it's Judy. Consider the source. So that's what he says about Judy Prochnow. We've heard Sean Wright say similar things. Danny Mason, you know, they're not too keen on Judy Prochnow, at least behind her back. I don't know what they say to her. I have no idea. But what I do know is that we're just documenting here. We're documenting what these people say, what other people say, and then, you know what, at the end of the day, you get to decide, obviously. I'm not going to try to tell you who's right, who was lying, who was there, who wasn't there. I don't know. I know I wasn't there. I'm sure many of you listening to this, watching this, were not there either. But we're going to talk about who was there. And we're going to talk about some of the conflicting reports and what they were doing there, what happened inside of there. We've already kind of talked about how little time they had. 20 minutes. I don't know. All these people in there for 20 minutes? That makes me suspect that obviously they were there on multiple times. On multiple days, possibly even? I don't know. But what we know for sure is what's in those documents, and then we know, okay, this person said that, this person said this. That's what we'll be covering here. So the suspicious activity chapter, it's kind of a cluster. When I went back and read it, because it's not a direct timeline, and I still like, should it have been? You know, it's pretty close, but for me it was very important. You'll see a lot of the Mason Hendricks quotes, and a lot of his what he told me is kind of more towards the end, and some of the strange things that he said about, you know, what the cops were doing there and everything, and how could they miss this, and that the wall was painted white when they were there, and at that point they did not know about the blood writing on the wall, because the wall was already painted. So obviously the cleaner, somebody had been there, but we know that they're still there on January 20th. So should anybody have been there in the house at this time? Was it still a crime scene? Maybe not. Was the scene quote unquote cleared? Possibly, sure. Should they have been there at that time? Should they have waited till the cleaners had done their job on January 20th? Well, again, you will decide that for yourself. We're going to present the facts as we know them, just the facts, man. And of course, we'll have some speculations, man, too, as well, because there's a lot of speculations going around. And when you have the biggest speculation is that David Crowley is guilty, that opens up Pandora's box to all sorts of speculation. So maybe we shouldn't speculate that David Crowley is guilty and then get butthurt when other people start speculating about other things too. Just a thought there. But one thing that is not speculation is that you can access all of those files. You can get my book for free. You can download it right now if you go to thegraystage.wordpress.com. You can download it for free. You can read it. Do whatever you want with it. Everything's source. There has been talk about maybe an updated version, maybe even a possible second version. I've got a few other things I have to wipe off my plate before any of that is going to happen, obviously, but you just never know. I get asked all the time, what's new with the case? Well, there's always something new. I mean, you have to tell me where you left off. But I think if you really want to get caught up and make sure that you're all caught up, start with my book. Starting with the book will show you everything that we have done up until this point, I guess, or whenever I released it, in 2020. So up until January 2020, that was what we had, and the most relevant stuff. Not everything, obviously. That's the great thing about doing this podcast, is that there's a lot of stuff that we do not cover in this book that we will talk about in the podcast. So it'll be a continual thing. I believe we're not even halfway through the book yet, and we've already got 17 shows. So we'll see. We'll see where this goes. But remember, on the first of every month, we put out a new podcast. I don't want to say we drop a new podcast, because I'm not dropping it. Nothing is being dropped, hopefully. The police dropped the ball with this case. That we know. So I don't want to do that with this podcast. So I'll try my best not to. That's all that I can do. And if I'm wrong, I'll have to admit that I'm wrong where I get things wrong. We make corrections. Simple as that. What really matters is the truth, not credibility, because as we know, I don't care about my credibility. Okay? I don't give two slaps of a monkey's ass about my credibility. Trust me on that one. Because it doesn't matter. I know what the truth is. I know what the facts are. I know what I know. And that's all that I know. I am what I am, and that's all that I am. So I'm very confident in that. Very confident in everything that I've put in my book, and very confident about that there are no facts that prove David Crowley guilty. Very confident about that. That's what I know. So after 6 years now, nobody has been able to prove otherwise, right? You don't see that. So, and if you do, the police need it, because I'm sure they would love to solve this case, not just have it ruled quote unquote exceptionally cleared and tell us all to basically move on. It just seems like this family deserves a lot better, and it's not that hard either. It's not that difficult. I mean, if you have a bunch of us regular people who can figure this stuff out, who can look into this and research this, the police can do the same. You can do the same too. So it's not that hard. It takes little effort, but a little effort can go a very long way. And in this case, it definitely has. It has brought us closer to the truth every day, every single day. I hope it brings you closer to the truth, and I hope that it reminds you that David Crowley is not guilty. It's as simple as that. Like I said, if I'm wrong, please, I will be willing to admit that I'm wrong. That's all we've ever asked for, is the evidence that shows that he's guilty. This doesn't exist, my friends, my folks, my peeps. It is non-existent. And so you have to ask yourself a lot of questions based on that. How do we get here? Why wasn't more done to really investigate this case? Not just to investigate David and why they want to believe that he's guilty. It's totally backwards. It's not the way that you should do it. Many cops are going to tell you that. Many of the Apple Valley police, maybe privately, may even tell you that. Off record may tell you that. Retired may tell you that. Obviously, they're not going to say in public. They're not going to put their job in jeopardy for this. And I think we have just a lot of people, all of the Gray State goons that were just like so quick, they're a victim, woe is me, blah, 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 but David's guilty. But hey, we're still going to move forward with his project and everything. And, it's a lot of doublespeak. The more lies that we caught them in, the more they had to change their story. That's all documented stuff. It's not us making things up. It's documented. It's their quotes. When they have one quote, that says it was a pact, and then turn around, no, it wasn't a pact. Then go back to it was a pact. Where does it end, right? But I'm not chasing them. I'm not chasing the Gray State goons. I'm chasing the facts. I'm chasing where this case goes. I'm chasing to where we can get some closure to this. Closure is really, I guess, what we are chasing here. Closure is not just dropping the case and moving on. It's not going to bring you closure. If you think that is, you are delusional. You're lying to yourself. You can only do that for so long. You can lie to me if you want. Yeah, many of them have. You cannot lie to yourself. So stop trying. It's not going to work. It's misplaced anger and misplaced hatred to come after the researchers, the people that are honestly, sincerely looking into this case. You spent half the time looking for stuff that proved David Crowley guilty instead of just assuming that that he is, which is not true at all. I know it's not true. The police can't even prove it unless you're withholding information from the police. That's never a good idea either. But it happens. People do it. They shouldn't, but they do it. I guess it's pretty easy to do if the police really don't want to hear it and they're not open to any other theories or any, looking into anything else that might show David Crowley is not guilty. It's like we have to present a whole case. We got to do the job for them to even look at anything, any alternatives. Well, fat chance of that, even though I think we've done a pretty good job of doing that, if they look. I hope they are looking. I hope they are watching. I hope they are listening. I hope they will keep an open mind. And I hope that one day somebody will come. Somebody will come forward. And that's why we'll say, okay, let's take another look at this case. Let's take a deeper dive into this. Let's prove these assholes wrong, What's wrong with that? They don't have time. You don't have time. We're talking about, a very important case to a lot of people. It is a big scar on the Apple Valley Police, on Minnesota, on Hollywood, on the Gray State Goons. They should be the first ones here. Because if they can help prove David did not do this, they can run off and do whatever they want with David's project, in his memory, in his name, instead of bashing him all the time. So, the fact that they go around bashing David Crowley really makes me think maybe they weren't really David Crowley's friends. Maybe that's why he was distancing himself from them. We hear a lot about this party, for Raniya's party, and how David was distancing, him and Komel were distant. I don't know about that. I wasn't there, but We know that he was distancing himself from all of them. They were all there. I don't know. It's a mixed bag. And again, David Crowley is not here to defend himself. And you would think that friends of David Crowley would be the first ones to stand up and defend him and say, wait a minute, you know, okay, maybe he is guilty, but let's look at this. I mean, how quickly did these guys not only believe David Crowley was guilty, but spread that propaganda and tried to force that propaganda onto other people in threatening ways too. And this is not going to work. It's not going to work. You don't give in to terrorists, and you don't respond to threats. It just kind of shows you that we're on the right path, and you know, you just keep searching for the truth. That's all that you can do, and in the end, if you do that, you win. That's how you win. Not by giving in, not by giving up, but by looking for truth, by promoting the truth, and by sticking to the truth, sticking to your guns, not being intimidated by these losers. So, we're winners. We keep looking into this. We keep the case active. We keep reminding people, all the new people that are constantly showing up in the group, asking questions, wanting to know. They don't want me to tell them what it is. They want to find it out for themselves. So the evidence is there. The documents are there. If you don't have time to go through all of the thousands of pages, look at all the photos, you know, you should have time to at least read my book. It's 200 pages. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. You can, you know, download it right now and just read it. It's all source. Everything is source. Everything that's in there. And then you can, you know, what I hope is that will then make you want to go back through the documents and take a deeper look, take a closer look. But, you know, that's your choice too. If you read all this stuff and you're like, no, I still think he's guilty. Well, all right, that's fine. You know, that's your choice. I can't change that. I can't change you. But I know what I know. I know where I stand on this case, and that's pretty much it. You know. So we'll see what happens next, but I am looking forward to this next podcast. Hopefully we'll get everybody back on as well. I don't know if we'll do it live. Last time, you know, it didn't really work out that well. There were some buffering issues and people couldn't hear half of it. Of course, because I had the audio backed up, I was able to put out I guess a backup version of that show. So we'll see what happens with that. But regardless of if we do it live this Sunday, we're gonna be recording it this Sunday, probably about 12 p.m. or so. I do believe that I don't want to rush this one. I don't want to rush this chapter either. So I'm still gonna plan on doing about 50 minutes, 55 minutes. I know I say that every time. We've done it once out of 17 shows, maybe. So we'll see how far we can get with this one. The preparation that I wanted to do and everything, I have not been able to do that. I've not had time. You know, believe it or not, I do have other things going on in this world here too. But you know, I'm not just gonna drop this case. Sorry, it's not gonna happen. Let's get some closure on this. Let's get some real closure on what happened with David Crowley. At the very least, let's all understand that he's innocent. I don't know. I mean, like I said, you don't have to. You can believe whatever you want, but what is it based on? It should be based on some facts. Not second, third-hand knowledge, secret knowledge that nobody can see. So, that is about that. So June 1st, expect it. Expect us. It's coming. The next live podcast, or the next new podcast, I guess. This will be Suspicious Activity Part 2. The way it looks right now, we probably will have to have a part 3. We'll see. We'll see how far we can get looking into this one. But we still have a long ways to go. We are at the point now where this is the last missing bullet that they're going to find in February. 1 month later. It takes them a month to contact Klein to get in touch with him. And Klein starts telling them things they did not know, including that there was a bullet hole, including that there was a bullet. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about the image that the Apple Valley Police Department says does show that there was a bullet hole on January 17th, the day the bodies were found. They've already admitted that they missed it. Nobody saw it. They did not see it on January 17th. Nobody did. Nobody, not know how. Chris Klein saw it. Mason Hendricks saw it. Who else saw it? Why is there no blood on it? How do you have David's DNA on it, but not his blood? It's kind of weird, right? So we'll talk about all that. I believe that's about it, my friends. Hopefully you will tune in for the next Gray Stage podcast. Take a listen. I'll probably put a YouTube version out as well, like I always do. I think I always do. A little late sometimes, but I will try to get one out for everybody, for the YouTubers. But wherever you listen to your podcast, wherever you get your